Chapter 3506. Yi Shiwen killed Copper Zune, who was already at the peak of the fifth realm, in 3 slashes. Yi Shiwen's amazing combat power was evident. Ordinary fifth realm experts were no match for him. Originally, Yi Shiwen had been able to beat Bronze Lord Zune by taking advantage of his mistakes. But now, he had killed Bronze Lord Zune in 3 moves. Yi Shiwen's fighting prowess had increased exponentially after refining the revered martial seal. He couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as before. The next step was to break through to the 5th realm in one go. At that time, his combat power will be able to break through to the 6th realm, as long as he didn't encounter a high-level heavenly master above the 7th realm. He would be absolutely safe. However, he didn't have time to think about this at this time. After the loud roar, a figure with a terrifying aura approached directly. The speed was extremely fast, and in just a moment, it was already catching up. It was the Moon City Lord. The Moon City Lord had just escaped. Before he could rejoice, he saw his most loyal subordinate killed by Yi Shiwen in 3 slashes. Even though in Huang Xiaolong's heart, Tong Zun was definitely not as important as the Yin-Yang Emperor and the Fusion Emperor, Tong Zun had been loyal and devoted to him for so many years. Tong Zun had even betrayed the Fortune Divine Dynasty for Huang Xiaolong's sake, leading the Devil Path era here. Even if he had a heart of stone, he couldn't really be indifferent to such a loyal subordinate. Moreover, his only son and his most loyal subordinate had died in Yi Shiwen's hands. How could he tolerate such a result? He suddenly flew into a rage and was extremely angry. "Marshal Zune, I will kill you." The roar of the city lord of Moon City shook the entire primal chaos. He was the most supreme figure in the world. Even in the many ancient epics, a figure like him was the most supreme. Those who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him were as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. The murderous intent he released shook the earth and mountains. The chaos erupted like raging waves, wave after wave. The terrifying murderous intent turned into a frenzy, almost drowning Yi Shiwen. Fortunately, Yi Shiwen was already prepared. He knew that the Moon City Lord would definitely come out, and it wouldn't be long. Therefore, he used all his strength and killed Copper Zune in 3 moves. However, the Moon City Lord came out much earlier than he initially thought. However, he was still prepared. The first wave of chaos turned into a terrifying attack wave, almost engulfing him. However, his reaction was faster. His body also released a terrifying murderous intent. Although his strength couldn't be compared to the Moon City Lord, it was still very easy for him to freeze the chaos. His entire body was like a sea-stabilizing needle, freezing the chaos within thousands of miles. Up, down, left, right, the sun, the moon, and the universe. Everything around him was completely frozen. Meanwhile, the chaos outside of this range was still slamming over at an alarming speed. In a split second, Yi Shiwen clearly saw the Moon City Lord waving his hand, and the entire chaos was sealed. The chaos space was completely locked. The direction of Sun City was completely sealed. In this split second, Yi Shiwen clearly saw the Moon City Lord waving his hand, and the entire chaos was sealed. The chaos space was completely locked, and the direction of Sun City was completely blocked. This also meant that he couldn't return to Sun City, and the Sun City Lord obviously couldn't help him at this time. Even if he wanted to break out, there was still the Scarlet Serpent Demon, who was enough to hold him back. The Moon City Lord wanted to completely seal off his escape route, and then force him to his death. In an instant, Yi Shiwen had already made a decision. A pair of wings instantly stretched out behind him. This pair of wings was shining with golden light, and the laws were flowing on it in the form of liquid. The laws of time, space, and speed had all evolved to the extreme. Whoosh! In the next second, Yi Shiwen had already appeared in the endless distant void, and the place where he had been fighting a moment ago had already been grabbed by a big, chaotic hand. It had crushed it forcefully. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but be slightly shocked. This giant chaotic hand was really terrifying. He didn't have much time to think, and immediately turned around to escape. It was impossible to escape to Sun City now, because Sun City was currently sealed and Moon City had become the base camp of the ancient era. If he rushed up, it would undoubtedly be courting death, and he wasn't a match for the Moon City Lord, so he had to escape frantically. As soon as he escaped, the Moon City Lord actually caught up with him, and he could faintly feel the terrifying aura of the Moon City Lord. Boom, boom, boom. The giant chaotic hand kept exploding in the chaos, and every time it exploded, everything within thousands of miles would be blown away. Any existence under this giant chaotic hand couldn't withstand a single blow. Although he seemed to be vulnerable in front of a middle heavenly master, in fact, it wasn't that simple. He was still the top existence in the world, and it could only be said that the strength of a middle heavenly master was too strong. At this time, in front of Yishiwen, the Moon City Lord finally erupted with his original strength. The Moon City Lord's face was gloomy. Yishiwen had killed his son and his most loyal subordinate. So in his heart, Yishiwen was already a target to be killed. Yishiwen obviously knew this, but it was useless. The Moon City Lord continued to chase after him. In terms of comprehension of the speed law, Yishiwen was naturally above the Moon City Lord. Yishiwen had already comprehended the speed law to the space-time law. It could be said to be shocking. Yishiwen was confident that he wouldn't fall behind even if he was compared to a Middle Empyrean. However, the problem was that his skills were far inferior to the Moon City Lord's. The Moon City Lord relied on his own superb skills to withstand everything. From time to time, he would spit out essence energy, and then there would be a burst of speed, and he was getting closer and closer to Yishiwen. Every breath of essence energy required tens of thousands of years of cultivation. How could the Moon City Lord not feel heartache when he spat it out just like that? However, there was no better way to vent his anger than to kill Yishiwen. He simply couldn't care about anything else. Sensing that the Moon City Lord was getting closer and closer, Yishiwen could only grit his teeth and prepare for battle. The Moon City Lord was determined to kill him today. A breath of essence energy consumed tens of thousands of years of cultivation. It seemed extravagant, but no one knew how many years the Moon City Lord had cultivated for. He also didn't know how many billions of years he had cultivated. When the Fortune Creation Heaven Lord was still around, he was already an extremely powerful powerhouse. Although doing this would hurt his vitality, it wouldn't hurt his origin, so he didn't care. Yishiwen's martial power was far inferior to that of the City Lord of the Moon City. Even if he had used the 7th metal ancestral chi to refine his gilded tyrant form, it was still not enough to fight against a matchless powerhouse like the City Lord of the Moon City. The reason for that was because the Moon City's City Lord's abilities were simply too many. Relying on these methods alone was useless. Most importantly, the difference in their skills was too great. Yishiwen was only at the peak of the 4th realm, while the Moon City Lord was already a peak heavenly venerate at the peak of the 9th realm. They weren't on the same level at all. At this time, the supreme ancestral symbol was floating up and down in his body. Yishiwen gritted his teeth. If it really didn't work, he could only rely on the supreme ancestral symbol to fight. The Gung Metal Ancestral Chi was only one of the origins of the Gung Metal Major World. It was not yet formed and was considered a semi-finished product. Its power was limited. Even if it evolved, it could only hurt the Moon City Lord at most, and this was when the Moon City Lord was unprepared. The difference in strength between the two sides was that great. But the supreme ancestral symbol was different. It was the origin of the world that had already formed. Its power was unimaginable, and Yishiwen couldn't use its full power yet. Moreover, Yishiwen hadn't had the time to properly comprehend the uses of the supreme ancestral symbol. But it was too late now. There was no other way. He could only try. There was only one battle. Thinking of this, Yishiwen gritted his teeth. According to the chant that venerable heavenly talisman immortal had taught him, he completely fused the supreme ancestral symbol into his body. At this moment, countless runes appeared in Yishiwen's body like veins. Yishiwen only felt endless power emerge from the supreme ancestral symbol, and then suddenly boil, rushing into his limbs and bones. Human unity. This was the fundamental method of the entire Talisman Taoism era. What the Talisman Taoism era cultivated was Talisman Taoism. From the beginning of their cultivation, they cultivated a Talisman Taoism. They nurtured a Talisman Taoism in their body and nurtured it to become stronger and stronger. In a battle, once a Talisman Taoist was pushed to his limit, he would release the state of human unity. That was his strongest state. Previously, Venerable Heavenly Talisman Immortal had taught Yi Shiwen the most superior talisman, Tao magical power. Among them, this person could temporarily fuse with the power of the supreme ancestral symbol. This was also one of the reasons why Yi Shiwen accepted the supreme ancestral symbol. Otherwise, if the supreme ancestral symbol could only be used to comprehend the laws of the talisman Tao, it would be a little too useless. Although it could help Yi Shiwen, it wouldn't affect him much even if it didn't. But it was different if the human unity could be used. Previously, when the Devil Tao era attacked the Talisman Tao era, they had already surrounded the entire Talisman Tao era. Venerable Heavenly Talisman Immortal was able to kill his way out and even forcibly resist the heaven-splitting devil axe and escape because he relied on the human unity of the supreme ancestral symbol. It forcibly increased his power. Yi Shiwen felt an explosive power raging in every cell of his body. This kind of violent power was constantly tearing his body apart, as if it wanted to destroy him. Chapter 35:07. An incomparably terrifying energy was wreaking havoc in his body. It was just like a galloping beast wreaking havoc in the jungle. It couldn't even stop. Even with Yi Shiwen's strength, there was no way for him to control it. That was because this power was too terrifying. It was so huge that it was hard to imagine. Yi Shiwen had never possessed such terrifying power. This was the ancestral symbol refined by the talisman ancestor of the Talisman Tao era. Its power was naturally great. The supreme ancestral symbol had always been the guardian of the Talisman Tao era. It could be said that the supreme ancestral symbol had saved the Talisman Tao era from danger several times. Even Heaven Talisman Immortal had escaped by relying on the supreme ancestral symbol. Although Yi Shiwen had high hopes for the power of the supreme ancestral symbol from the beginning, he never thought that the supreme ancestral symbol could contain such terrifying power. If it had been another celestial master, even if it had been Bronze Lord, his body would have exploded. Only someone like him, who had a terrifying physical cultivation base and the support of the Gung metal ancestral chi, could barely contain this violent force. Even so, Yi Shiwen knew that this situation could not last for long. If he maintained this state for a long time, his body would be torn into countless pieces. Even someone as powerful as Heaven Talisman Immortal was left with such a terrible injury that could not be healed for a long time. She could only recover a portion of her strength. In fact, the fundamental reason was this person's state. In a short period of time, the person's state had indeed greatly increased her combat power. She could even escape from the heaven-splitting demonic axe. However, because there were too many experts from the Demon Tao era besieging the Talisman Tao era, she could not kill them all. The delay was too long and left permanent injuries. Even when she met Yi Shiwen, she could not heal it. This was also the reason why she finally chose to submit to Yi Shiwen. Originally, with Yi Shiwen's strength, it would be difficult for him to have any contact with Heaven Talisman Immortal. However, that battle had really hurt his vitality. Therefore, when she gave the supreme ancestral symbol to Yi Shiwen, she had warned him not to use it carelessly. She couldn't even withstand the supreme ancestral talisman's fusion state with her peak heavenly venerable strength, let alone Yi Shiwen's strength. Initially, Yi Shiwen didn't care much about it. However, he could feel the terrifying power contained in it now. Yi Shiwen had always had the image of a gentle and elegant young man. However, his skin had turned red at this moment. The blood vessels inside his body had burst open. A dreadful power had burst out from his pores. Even the primal chaos energy had been annihilated. Terrifying, he looked like a beast that was about to be released from its cage. This was his current appearance. Just a glance at him was enough to give off an extremely terrifying feeling. The moment this aura appeared, it alerted the Sun City Lord and the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerate, who were still fighting in Sun City. It wasn't just the two of them. Even the Heavenly Venerates felt it. Because they were too far away from the Fortune Divine Dynasty, the Heavenly Venerables were unable to see through the countless worlds with a single glance, like in the Fortune Divine Dynasty. However, they could still feel the terrifying aura erupting from the primal chaos. The aura that erupted in an instant made their hearts palpitate. What the hell is going on? The Heavenly Venerates had the same thought. They didn't know what it was in the primal chaos. One should know that in the endless primal chaos, there were also endless dangers. Many laws that could be reflected in a stable world were simply turbulent and couldn't be reflected in the primal chaos. Terrifying law storms, space fragments, time crystals, and chaotic beasts could be seen everywhere in the primal chaos. They were born from the will of the primal chaos. Some were as strong as the Heavenly Venerates, while some were as weak as the Emperor Lords. However, without exception, they were the most terrifying. There were even terrifying beasts that could fight against experts like the Fortune God Lord. This terrifying and violent aura was enough to make them feel terrified. It didn't have any attributes or epics. It was just violent, terrifying, and powerful. Even the Heavenly Venerates in Sun City could feel the supreme ancestral symbol energy erupting from Yi Shiwen's body, let alone the Moon City Lord. He had just caught up to Yi Shiwen when he felt that he had encountered a beast that had just burst out of its cage. He immediately became alert. Originally, he didn't care about Yi Shiwen at all. As long as he caught up to Yi Shiwen, it wouldn't be difficult for him to kill Yi Shiwen. However, he felt an extreme sense of danger as soon as he caught up to Yi Shiwen. It was the feeling of being chased by a beast. He hadn't felt such an extreme sense of danger for many years. He had been a high and mighty peak Heavenly Venerate for many years. He was also one of the top 10 city lords. Including those ancient epochs, there were very few who could pose a fatal threat to him. He had never had such a feeling before. Even the Middle Empyrean that had sealed him didn't give him such a feeling. He didn't feel that he was weaker than a Middle Empyrean. It was just that he was restrained by the Middle Empyrean speed laws. Purely based on his own magic power, a Middle Empyrean wouldn't be much stronger than him. However, Yi Shiwen was different. In terms of realm, Yi Shiwen was still nothing. Even the physical cultivation that Yi Shiwen was so proud of, in his opinion, could be dealt with. After all, the difference in realm was too big. It was big enough to ignore everything. His spiritual power was many times stronger than Yi Shiwen's. But now, all these advantages were useless. Yi Shiwen's eyes erupted with a kind of threatening chill, as well as a kind of dreadful and violent power. This power alone offset all his advantages. He only felt goosebumps on his back, as if he had encountered a peerless monster. "Wu Zun, do you have any last words?" The Moon City Lord said faintly. Although he felt an extremely terrifying threat, he still wanted to maintain his demeanor. In his opinion, there should not be a situation where he had to fight Yi Shiwen. Even if he felt the terrifying power in Yi Shiwen's body, it would not be an exception. Yi Shiwen just grinned. He felt that the power in his body was not only surging, but it was also becoming more and more terrifying. It was about to explode. There's not much time. Let's finish this quickly. The Moon City Lord could feel the uncontrollable tyranny in Yi Shiwen's words. He couldn't help but sneer and say, "Although I don't know what method you use to increase your skills to this extent, it is useless. Strength that is not obtained through cultivation is not obtained through cultivation after all. You can be brave for a moment, but you can't become the foundation of eternity. Didn't you feel great when you killed my son and my subordinates? Now it's time for you to pay the price." Before he finished speaking, the Moon City Lord finally launched his ultimate technique. No matter how much he looked down on Yi Shiwen's state, he could instinctively feel how dangerous Yi Shiwen's state was. How could he really let this go? In an instant, countless huge stone tablets appeared in the entire chaos. These stone tablets towered into the chaos and surrounded Yi Shiwen. They were really huge, and there were too many of them. They were like stars dotting the starry sky, and Yi Shiwen was the moon among the stars. Each stone tablet was engraved with unimaginable scriptures. Below the stone tablets, there were hells, and it was unknown how many demon gods were suppressed in those hells. This was the technique that the Moon City Lord had used to deal with the Middle Heavenly Venerate. Although the Middle Heavenly Venerate had easily broken it, it did not mean that this technique was not terrifying. This was because Yi Shiwen could now feel how terrifying the great formation formed by these stone tablets was. It seemed like a random layout, but it contained a kind of great Tao. It used the power of the great Tao to suppress Yi Shiwen. Below these steels was the graveyard of countless demonic gods, countless experts from ancient times until now buried in the primal chaos. They were even larger than stars, endless fluctuations connected into countless barriers and formations. No matter what kind of power you have, you can't escape from the great formation formed by my moon steel and moon prison. It's useless even if you have the speed of a middle heavenly venerate. The Moon City Lord said indifferently. This was his technique, and it was not weak. Losing to a middle heavenly venerate was just an accident. This time, he wanted to suppress Yi Shiwen and turn him into one of the demons in the moon prison. He wanted Yi Shiwen to become his own power and be used by him. Roar! Countless angry roars erupted from the moon prison. These were the angry roars of demonic gods. Some of them were still alive and powerful to an unimaginable level. Some had already died and turned into vengeful spirits that ruled over a region. Moon Steel, this is the Moon Steel. Yi Shiwen felt that even his breathing had become rough. The power in his body could not be suppressed and was about to burst out. This was the Moon Steel that had been easily shattered by the Middle Heavenly Venerate. It was nothing in front of the Middle Heavenly Venerate. However, it made him feel as if he could not move even an inch. These invisible fluctuations were like sharp blades. If Yi Shiwen dared to move even a little bit, he would be directly killed. This was a strange scene. It seemed as if Yi Shiwen had also been trapped inside. There were countless scriptures engraved on the surface of each of the moon steels. Now, the scriptures had begun to fly out one after another. Then they took shape in the air. They shook off countless primal chaos and transformed into a cage. They wanted to subdue Yi Shiwen, just like how he had subdued the other devil gods. However, at this moment, Yi Shiwen suddenly opened his eyes. A terrifying power erupted from his body. Chapter 3508. The power in Yi Shiwen's body erupted all of a sudden, just like a wild beast that had been released from its cage. Boundless power spread out in all directions like a surging sea. Boom! There was a deafening roar, and the pressure exerted on Yi Shiwen's body disappeared completely. It wasn't a magical power, nor was it a nomological law. He had relied on the energy in his body to forcefully break through. Then, he looked at the cage that had descended from the sky and moved. This was the first time he had fought with a peak heavenly venerate like the Moon City Lord. Boom! Power erupted from Yi Shiwen's body. His entire body was golden and dazzling, and all kinds of laws turned into ribbons that danced in the air. This was his various understandings of the Great Path, and all of them manifested around him. 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Yi Shiwen blasted out a punch, and the momentum of his fist rushed directly into the chaos, cutting off the entire chaos. The power of the fist rolled out and turned the endless chaos into powder. Yi Shiwen had become extremely dangerous at this moment. He had used all of his magical powers and martial techniques in order to vent the excessive and violent energy in his body. Bang! There was a deafening collision sound. The moment the cage fell, Yi Shiwen pierced through it. The entire cage shattered and turned into spirit energy that scattered all over the sky. Even the divine marks of the Moon City Lord gradually dimmed. Although the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation fist was already very strong, the reason it could erupt with such power and casually break the attack of the Moon City Lord was because of the endless energy. Violent, direct, and invincible. The expression of the Moon City Lord couldn't help but turn a little solemn when he saw that his attack had been shattered by Yi Shiwen's punch. However, it was just a little solemn. In his eyes, he still didn't take Yi Shiwen seriously at all. Wu Zun, you aren't too bad. However, your methods are simply useless in front of some people. In front of me, who has grasped the world origin source. All your methods are just a joke, the Moon City Lord said coldly. As soon as the Moon City Lord's voice fell, a moon steel fell directly. It grew bigger and bigger in an instant, as if a world had fallen on the spot. Within this moon steel, a huge moon prison appeared in front of Yi Shiwen. Countless demons rushed out of it and rushed towards Yi Shiwen. One after another, they opened their bloody mouths to swallow Yi Shiwen. In the eyes of these demon gods who had been suppressed for countless years and were already a little delirious, Yi Shiwen, whose vitality was as vigorous as the ocean, was the best food. Yi Shiwen was fearless. It was not that he did not know how terrifying the steel of the moon was. The steel of the moon had suppressed countless powerful enemies since ancient times. It could be said to be a supreme secret technique. However, he was not afraid. He stretched out his arms, and a dazzling golden light erupted from his arms. Wisps of the great path's nomological laws flowed out, causing his arms to sublimate. 3,000 martial paths were faintly discernible, shattering the chaos. Boom! There was a loud tearing sound as Yi Shiwen punched out with both fists. His fists were like two roaring golden dragons, representing the firmness and yang of heaven and earth. All order and all evil were suppressed. The two golden dragons swept into the midst of those demon gods. The scene of the middle heavenly master destroying the steel of the moon and destroying the moon prison seemed to have reappeared today. However, Yi Shiwen's fighting style was even more violent. The middle heavenly master relied on his supreme speed to bring about terrifying destructive power, while Yi Shiwen relied on his majestic and violent energy. Boom, boom, boom. Almost in an instant, those demon gods suppressed by the moon prison that were close to the two golden dragons were all turned into ashes. Their flesh and blood exploded and dissipated in the chaos. Everywhere they passed, they were completely swept away. All of this took a long time to describe, but it actually happened in an instant. Those tens of thousands of demon gods that had rushed down had all been turned into ashes, and Yi Shiwen's fist directly hit the steel of the moon. Boom! Although Yi Shiwen had swept away countless demon gods along the way, the power of his fists was still not reduced. They directly hit the steel of the moon. Buzz! Waves of ripples appeared on the surface of the steel of the moon. They spread out with Yi Shiwen's fists as the core, like the surface of water, and the sound of metal cicadas could also be heard. This was the protection of the steel of the moon. His scriptures began to flow like flowing water, forming a protective barrier that protected the steel of the moon within. However, this protective barrier that was formed by the scriptures only lasted for a moment before it suddenly shattered and fiercely hit the steel of the moon. Clang! The steel of the moon seemed to be made of stone, but in reality, it was made of some unknown material. It was extremely sturdy. However, this sturdiness only lasted for a moment. Yi Shiwen only let out a slight snort, and a terrifying energy erupted from his arms. Boom! The steel of the moon finally couldn't hold on any longer, and it shattered on the spot. This steel of the moon, which could suppress countless demon gods, was ultimately unable to suppress Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen had only used his fists to shatter all the shackles and suppress everything. All of this made Yi Shiwen feel as if his entire body was surging and his blood was boiling. At this moment, the warlike genes in his bones seemed to have awakened and completely erupted. This berserk power incited his fighting spirit at every moment. Oomph. The City Lord of the Moon City was slightly surprised when he saw that his steel of the moon was unexpectedly unable to suppress Yi Shiwen. The amount of violent energy overflowing from Yi Shiwen's body was simply too much. Even at his level, he would still be shocked by this amount of energy. However, he wasn't anxious. How could he not see that this was a method to increase his fighting strength in a short period of time? This was Yi Shiwen's biggest weakness. If he didn't cultivate himself, he wouldn't be able to cultivate himself in the end. With a thought, another steel of the moon came crashing down. At the same time that Yi Shiwen had just destroyed a steel of the moon, another one fell down. There was still an endless number of steels of the moon, and it was simply impossible to destroy them all. Even experts of the same level would be dragged to death by him, let alone someone like Yi Shiwen, who had forcibly raised his strength with the help of the supreme ancestral symbol. As long as there was time, Yi Shiwen wouldn't even need to make a move. Yi Shiwen would collapse without a fight. When the second steel fell, Yi Shiwen understood the thoughts of the city, Lord of the Moon City. He had to admit that the city Lord of the Moon City was indeed rich in fighting experience, and had seen through his weakness almost immediately. His body was suffering from a terrifying tearing at every moment, and he had no choice but to make a move. Only by making a move and releasing some of his energy would he feel slightly better. However, he didn't have much time to think about these things at this time. The second steel had already fallen, and the third steel was also falling at a visible rate. There were too many steels of the moon, and they were almost like the vast stars in the sky. There was no way to destroy them all, and they fell like raindrops, slamming towards Yi Shiwen. Roar! Yi Shiwen let out a long roar, and many strange phenomena appeared around his body. The sun, the moon, the mountains, the rivers, the heavens, the earth, and the stars interweaved to form a world. His fists swept out again, and they pounced forward like two golden dragons. Boom! 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 A series of loud explosions resounded, and a moon tablet exploded on the spot with each explosion. Yi Shiwen was as valiant and invincible as a treasure dragon. He didn't retreat at all. On the contrary, he killed his way into the midst of those moon tablets and started a fight. Countless steels of the moon were destroyed by his fists, and innumerable demon gods were killed by his fists. There was almost no one under his command. In the distance, the city Lord of the Moon City was extremely indifferent, and he wasn't moved at all when he saw this scene. Every steel of the moon required a lot of effort to successfully refine. He didn't know how many years he had spent refining these steels of the Moon City. He didn't know how many demon gods he had suppressed in them over the years. However, he didn't care. Wasn't the purpose of refining steel of the moon for so many years so that they could be used on such occasions? The most important thing was to be able to use them to kill strong enemies. At this time, Yi Shiwen had become a real strong enemy in his heart. Although Yi Shiwen had relied on external forces to achieve this threat was genuine. At the very least, Yi Shiwen was a big trouble at the moment, and he had to find a way to solve it. He could clearly see that Yi Shiwen was already an arrow at the end of its flight, even though he still looked invincible. The surface of Yi Shiwen's skin had begun to crack, and blood was flowing out uncontrollably. Although he had practiced an extremely powerful holy healing technique, he could only barely recover a little and couldn't stop his injuries from worsening. In this case, he wouldn't need to do much, and Yi Shiwen would die by his own hands. This also proved how sharp his vision was. His initial idea wasn't wrong at all. Don't be surprised and be defeated by the strange. Bang! Yi Shiwen's explosive fist energy once again smashed a steel into pieces. Every one of these steels wasn't simple, and he needed to use his full strength to break them. However, this wasn't the key. Instead, it was the fact that there were too many of these steels of the moon. It was almost endless. Yi Shiwen had broken countless steels of the moon from just now, but he still couldn't see the end. If this went on, he would definitely be exhausted to death. He could already feel that his body was already in tatters. If it weren't for the powerful recovery ability of a heavenly venerable's body and the miraculous phoenix regeneration technique, his body would have exploded long ago. Even a powerful body like him couldn't withstand the violent energy of the supreme ancestral symbol. An ordinary heavenly venerable wouldn't even be able to persist for half the time, and that would be enough for them to die without a burial. After all, borrowed power was only borrowed power, and not the right way. Fight! Yi Shiwen gritted his teeth, and the blood in his body surged even more violently. Chapter 3509. Yi Shiwen mobilized all of his qi and blood. The surging energy also surged together and exploded. Universe Creation Palm. Yi Shiwen finally broke out. He concentrated all of his power into the Universe Creation Palm. This palm almost gathered the power of heaven and earth together. Then it fiercely reversed and covered all of a sudden. This was the strongest Universe Creation Palm that Yi Shiwen had ever unleashed. This palm shook the entire primal chaos. Everyone could sense the existence of this palm. This was a situation that could shake the world with one palm. Rumble. As this palm descended, the chaos within a radius of countless miles was completely destroyed. It directly swept out an area, with Yi Shiwen's main body as the starting point, and the end point of this area was none other than the Moon City Lord. Yi Shiwen used this palm as the price to directly sweep away the steel of the moon that was blocking in front of him. As the price of this palm strike, a few more parts of his body exploded. Although the power of gathering such a violent power in one breath had multiplied, and he was able to use the Universe Creation Palm, the damage to his body had also multiplied. All of a sudden, his injuries had become much more serious, and the time he could last was even shorter. However, since he had already fought so far, he understood that it was meaningless to persist for too long. No matter how long he persisted, he would eventually be killed by the City Lord of Moon City. In fact, he might even be killed unscathed. The only way he could survive was to launch a counterattack and heavily injure or even kill the City Lord of Moon City. Since this was the only way to survive, he naturally had to go all out. At this time, no one could help him except himself. What? When the Full Moon City Lord thought that he was about to trap Yi Shiwen to death and exhaust him to death, Yi Shiwen's attack actually directly swept out a path towards him. Yi Shiwen was different from the Middle Heavenly Venerable. The Middle Heavenly Venerable had relied on his terrifying speed to overcome all obstacles, and had arrived in front of Yi Shiwen at lightning speed. However, Yi Shiwen had used his berserk strength to sweep away all the moon steels in his path. Their methods were different, but they had the same results. City Lord of Moon City, where can you hide now? Yi Shiwen's voice was still far away, as if he was not close yet. However, in the blink of an eye, he had already rushed to the front of the Moon City Lord. The Moon City Lord was shocked. Yi Shiwen had already rushed in front of him. However, he did not panic at all. He had experienced hundreds of battles. Yi Shiwen was not enough to surprise him. Appear, Moon Gate. At this time, a huge portal appeared in front of him. This portal fell from the sky, but it didn't smash towards him. Instead, it directly stopped in front of him. Just this door alone was hundreds of thousands of meters tall. Ordinary people would not be able to see the entire door with their eyes. This door had cut the entire primal chaos into two halves. One half was his world, and the other half was Yi Shiwen's world. It was an insurmountable gap. Countless moon steels flew over from behind Yi Shiwen and ferociously smashed towards him. The significance of Yi Shiwen's Universe Creation Palm would disappear if they caught up to him. Then, he would once again fall into the endless encirclement of the moon steels. Wu Zun, do you think that you can go against me just because you have some tricks up your sleeve? The Moon City Lord sneered. Even if you use all your tricks, you're not my match. You can't even hurt a hair of mine. The Moon City Lord was full of confidence. This Moon Gate was his strongest defense. It seemed to be a simple defense in front of him, but that was not the case. Instead, it cut the entire world into two halves. The two spaces were completely blocked and could not be passed through. Even a heavenly master would be cut in half by the divided space. It could be said to be a natural moat. Here, he was completely safe. No one could hurt him. This was the true face of all his magical powers. The steel of the moon killed strong enemies, and the Moon Gate protected his own safety. It could be said to be a combination of offense and defense. It was just that he had not used it when he had faced a Middle Heavenly Master. This was not because he was too arrogant, but because he had not had a chance. The speed of a Middle Heavenly Master was too fast. It was so fast that he did not have any time to react. He did not even have the chance to use the Moon Gate before he was directly sealed by the Middle Heavenly Master. This was why the Moon City Lord had said that the Moon City Lord had been restrained. The speed of a middle heavenly master was too fast. For someone like him who relied on magical powers to conquer, it was undoubtedly the nemesis of all nemeses. No matter how many tricks and magical powers he had, it was useless if he could not use them. However, his confident expression suddenly froze. Drip, drip, drip. Drops of blood dripped from his face. His body, which was said to be indestructible, was actually injured. In front of him, a long saber had unknowingly approached him. The sharp saber aura had injured his heavenly venerate body 3 inches away from him. A long blade had broken through his moon gate, which was said to be invincible, and had arrived in front of him. In fact, if not for the moon gate's obstruction, this blade would have been enough to poke a hole in his head. How is this possible? He still couldn't believe it. Ever since his gate of the moon had formed, it had never been broken through. However, at his level, there were indeed people who could force him to use the gate of the moon, but they were as rare as phoenix feathers and Chelan horns. However, the name revered martial artist was definitely not on that list. That person was just a junior who had achieved enlightenment not many years ago. Hee, are you really that confident in your moon gate? On the other side of the moon gate, Yi Shiwen chuckled. The long blade formed from the Gung metal ancestral chi in his hand had completely sunk into the moon gate. In fact, the moon gate was indeed worthy of being the strongest defense of the Moon City City Lord. It could be said that Yi Shiwen hadn't seen a more terrifying defense than this one in so many years. He would have had to expend a lot of energy to break it, even if he used the supreme ancestral symbol's power to bombard it without the interference of the moon steel. In that case, he would have lost the initiative long ago. The best way was to be like the middle heavenly master and use speed to break it, not giving him the opportunity to use the moon gate. However, in Yi Shiwen's opinion, the middle heavenly master's body of merit coupled with his peerless speed was enough to break the moon gate in one blow. In the world's martial arts, only speed was unbreakable and indestructible. The middle heavenly master had both of these. How could he not be powerful? However, Yi Shiwen had his own way, which was to use the long blade formed from the Gung metal ancestral chi to break it in one blow. Just what is that saber of yours made of? Even if it is a Tao artifact, it is impossible to break my moon gate. The Moon City Lord's eyes widened in complete disbelief. The bloody scar on his face gradually deepened from the upper right corner to the lower left corner. If it had been any closer, his entire head would have been cut off on the spot. For the Moon City Lord, who had been so confident just now, this was undoubtedly a slap in the face. This blade contained a power that even he was afraid of. When it had exchanged blows before, he had already been injured by the Gung metal ancestral chi. It was just that at that time, Yi Shiwen had used all his strength to only break his skin and make him lose a few drops of blood. It was not as terrifying as it was now. There is no need to say how powerful the Gung metal ancestral chi was. It was one of the origins of the Gung metal era. Although it had yet to take form, its power was unquestionable. With Yi Shiwen's current skills, he was unable to fully unleash its power. Now, he was relying on the violent power of the supreme ancestral symbol in his body to finally unleash the power of the Gung metal ancestral chi and break the moon gate. He looked at Yi Shiwen again. There was a greedy look in his eyes because he realized that Yi Shiwen seemed to have many secrets on him. Every single one of them was world-shaking, whether it was the universe creation palm or the technique that allowed his strength to skyrocket to the point where it was comparable to his own, or the long blade that could split his moon gate. Any one of them was enough to move a heavenly master of his level, because any one of them could greatly enhance his strength. If he could obtain all three, he was even confident that he could become one of the top heavenly masters. Even if he encountered a middle heavenly master, he would not be afraid, and he would be able to put up a fight. He might even be able to defeat and kill a middle heavenly master. Thinking of this, the greed in his heart suddenly burst out. Originally, in his opinion, killing Yi Shiwen wouldn't bring any benefits, nor would there be any benefits. He just wanted to avenge his son and his most loyal subordinates. But now he didn't think so. After killing Yi Shiwen, he would obtain enormous benefits. It was simply unimaginable. As countless thoughts popped up in the Moon City Lord's mind, the moon gate in front of him began to crumble inch by inch. The place where Yi Shiwen's gung metal ancestral qi had pierced through was the core of the entire moon gate. Although it was also its strongest point, it was also because of this that it was also its greatest weakness. The gung metal ancestral qi had forcefully pierced through it, causing the moon gate to be unable to be maintained. Crack, crack. Various cracks quickly appeared on the moon gate like a dense spider web, engraving itself on the moon gate. Bang! There was another loud sound, and the moon gate shattered. Die! Yi Shiwen let out a loud roar after he had broken the moon gate with his blade. He then rushed to the front of the Moon City Lord and blasted his fist forward. He wanted to kill the Moon City Lord. A great battle broke out instantly. Chapter 35:10. A real battle broke out. Yi Shiwen rushed to the front of the Moon City Lord in a single breath. He was racing against time because he was well aware of his own disadvantage. Relying on the supreme ancestral symbol to increase his strength was not the right way after all. Buzz! Yi Shiwen's fist energy tore through the sky, and a burst of terrifying explosive sounds erupted wherever it passed. There is a special vibration frequency, and it could even erupt with the most blazing rays of light. It was almost as terrifying as a fist that could destroy the world. Too fast. The speed of this punch was too fast, and all of this had happened too quickly. The Moon City Lord had not expected the situation to turn out like this. It should be known that he had the upper hand just now. How long had it been? Yet, he was suddenly crushed. The Moon City Lord's aura was rising and spreading, turning into a moon domain. Endless moonlight was like a giant hand trying to hold Yi Shiwen back. However, Yi Shiwen also knew that he had arrived at a critical moment. So how could he give up? His eyes flashed with a sharp light. He crazily stimulated the magic power in his body and crazily increased his fighting strength. At the same time, countless sword auras gushed out from every pore of his body, turning into destructive sword lights that destroyed any moonlight that flew over. They could not hold Yi Shiwen back at all. In the end, this punch still landed on the City Lord of Moon City, not giving him a chance to escape. Bang! Yi Shiwen's punch directly hit the Moon City Lord's head. There was a loud bang, and the Moon City Lord was blasted away like a meteor. Roar! The Moon City Lord felt an unprecedented sense of humiliation after being blasted away. Even a middle heavenly venerate did not make him feel this way. After all, they were of the same level. Being defeated by a middle heavenly venerate was not a humiliation. But what was Yi Shiwen? He was just a junior who had reached the Tao only 10,000 years ago. However, how could Yi Shiwen's attack end like this? He had finally managed to gain the upper hand. Although he had fused with the supreme ancestral symbol and was able to contend against the Moon City Lord, he could only contend against him. This was the first time he had gained the upper hand. He attacked mercilessly again. The martial elder seal flew out of his body, growing larger and larger until it turned into a small fortune realm. How is it possible for someone to refine a Tao artifact to this extent? The City Lord of the Moon City still couldn't believe what he had just seen. Yi Shiwen had fused the projection of the fortune realm into his revered martial seal. This was something impossible. This was different from the inner world within their bodies. It was a completely different concept. The inner world was an imitation of another world, and the laws that operated within it were all beneficial to him. However, this action was equivalent to duplicating a small version of the creation realm. The power of the entire Empyrean Tao artifact would be greatly increased. This was simply impossible because the heavenly Taos would not allow it. From ancient times until now, only the Good Fortune Heavenly Lord had succeeded in creating the Good Fortune Universe diagram. Yet, Yi Shiwen had done this. From this point of view, it could be seen that Yi Shiwen's secrets weren't limited to just one or two. Normally speaking, every celestial master had their own secrets, and The fortuitous encounters that they had were too numerous to enumerate. He had had countless fortuitous encounters since the beginning of his cultivation. In fact, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he had had thousands of fortuitous encounters over the years. Every fortuitous encounter had greatly improved his strength. However, he was certain that there seemed to be no fortuitous encounter that could compare to Yi Shiwen's secrets. However, he was only thinking about it at this time. Yi Shiwen's violent attacks were already threatening his life. The martial honorable seal grew larger and larger, and the small creation realm within the martial honorable seal also grew larger and larger. Then it suddenly slammed down. Boom! Even with the physical strength of the Moon City Lord, the martial honorable seal, which was infinitely strengthened by the energy of the supreme ancestral symbol, directly exploded under the bombardment. His physical body couldn't withstand such a bombardment at all, and directly exploded. Yi Shiwen's hand once again transformed into a long blade formed by the gung metal ancestral qi. He directly slashed down, wanting to take advantage of this opportunity to directly kill the Moon City Lord. This was a crazy idea. The Moon City Lord's strength was unquestionable, and his spirit was also terrifying. He could contend with ordinary celestial masters without relying on his physical body. With Yi Shiwen's current strength, even if he entered the state of human conformity, it was still impossible to annihilate him in one blow. However, the long blade formed by the gung metal ancestral qi could, because the gung metal ancestral qi was too sharp. It was so sharp that it could kill ordinary celestial masters in one blow. And at this critical moment, the Moon City Lord let out a long roar. A spirit doppelganger condensed on top of his torn body, blocking in front of Yi Shiwen. Puchi! Yi Shiwen's long blade formed by the gung metal ancestral qi slashed this spirit doppelganger in one blow. This spirit doppelganger was also very good, but it had to nibble away at Yi Shiwen, who had now entered an extremely violent state. However, this little bit of time had also bought the most crucial time for the Moon City Lord. His body suddenly penetrated through time and space and gathered together. Ordinary celestial masters would not have any power to fight back when they were beaten to such an extent by Yi Shiwen, but he was different. He still had the ability to fight back. It was just that he had lost at least hundreds of thousands of years of cultivation by Yi Shiwen's blow. That doppelganger was a life-saving, unique skill and magical power. It took him at least tens of millions of years to cultivate. Ever since he had cultivated it, he had never really used it. He did not expect that he would die here. In these tens of millions of years, he did not do anything but focused on cultivating this life-saving, unique skill. This was equivalent to Yi Shiwen crippling his tens of millions of years of bitter cultivation. In addition to the steels of the moon that were destroyed by Yi Shiwen previously, and the loss of his physical body, he could be said to have suffered a serious injury by Yi Shiwen. This, Yi Shiwen thought to himself. He actually let him escape. He did not expect the Moon City Lord to have such a life-saving, unique skill. It was a life-saving magical power that would only be automatically activated after his physical body was destroyed. Each of these old monsters was more terrifying than the last. The most important thing was that they had more time to practice compared to Yi Shiwen. In fact, he wouldn't have enough time to practice the same kind of magical power, even if he was given the same kind of magical power. Only celestial masters like them, whose cultivation had reached a limit that was difficult to break through easily, would cultivate all kinds of magical powers everywhere, so that their combat power could not increase under the circumstances that their cultivation realm could not increase. That could be said to be the best opportunity. If that saber had hit, the Moon City Lord would have been seriously injured even if he did not die. There was no other possibility except to escape. He had almost been killed. If this news spread, there was no doubt that it would become an eternal legend. The last time a city lord of the 10 divine cities had died was a long time ago. In everyone's hearts, they were eternal suns. Their radiance would never end. After escaping from Yi Shiwen's pursuit, the Moon City Lord took a few breaths. The injuries on his body were recovering at an astonishing speed. What a pity. Just a little bit more, and you could have killed me. You seize the opportunity very accurately, but it is a pity that you still have no way to kill me. The Moon City Lord said coldly. His tone was as cold as 10,000 years of ice. There will be another chance, Yi Shiwen said. The spiritual power in his body was surging. It was like the most violent ocean that was erupting. There was nothing that could suppress it. This was the most terrifying battle of his life, but he had no choice. He could only fight with all his strength. If he did not succeed, only death awaited him. He was not an expert who had truly reached that realm, but with the power of the supreme ancestral symbol, he had the power to contend with the Moon City Lord. Bang! 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 All of this took a long time to describe, but it actually happened in an instant. More moon steels chased after him and directly smashed into Yi Shiwen's body, causing him to bleed profusely. Yi Shiwen gritted his teeth. If this continued, it was only a matter of time before he was killed by the Moon City Lord. Although he was not at a disadvantage on the battlefield, time was his greatest enemy. In this bloody battle, he had become unprecedentedly powerful. His understanding of the Great Tao had also greatly improved. With the power of the supreme ancestral symbol, he had forcefully broken through the barrier of the realm, allowing him to see more. However, the price he had paid was also very frightening. He had never imagined that the Moon City Lord could be this strong. He had used all his strength, but was still no match for him. You will die without a doubt. You can no longer control the injuries in your body. The Moon City Lord laughed. His smile was incomparably sinister. Yi Shiwen had injured his vitality, but how much better could he be? He could almost see Yi Shiwen's muscles rupturing with the naked eye. Blood was flowing out almost uncontrollably. When Yi Shiwen had just erupted, it was clearly not like this. At that time, Yi Shiwen had only shown signs of losing control. In reality, he had still been able to control it, but now he was powerless to prevent his body from being damaged. Although he did not know what this move was, he knew that it would cause endless trouble. Even if Yi Shiwen did not die in this battle, his foundation would be damaged, and there was no way he could escape. I am a little unable to control it. Because of this, I have to end this battle quickly, Yi Shiwen said. His problem was that even the Moon City Lord could see the uncontrollable injuries on his body. How could he not know? Since you have forced me to this point, I can only fight to the death. Yi Shiwen's eyes were filled with determination. Opposite him, although the Moon City Lord did not know how Yi Shiwen planned to attack, he still took the initiative to be safe. In an instant, he surpassed the speed of light. Chapter 35:11. Although the Moon City Lord felt that as long as he trapped Yi Shiwen, he would be defeated without a fight, Yi Shiwen had continuously surprised him since the start of the battle. He had repeatedly exceeded his expectations. In order to ensure that there would be no accidents, he still made his move. One strike directly pierced through everything. The Moon City Lord was extremely terrifying. With Yi Shiwen's strength, there was no hope of fighting him head-on. Bang! Yi Shiwen's shoulder exploded and turned into a mass of bloody mist, dripping with blood. But Yi Shiwen's attack also arrived. In his hand, the gung metal ancestral chi transformed into a long blade. The blade slashed at the Moon City Lord, tearing a huge wound on his body. Injury for injury. Both of their injuries had reached an extremely terrifying level. Yi Shiwen's shoulder had burst open and was emitting hot air. Golden blood could be seen everywhere, and his golden bones were exposed outside. Yi Shiwen no longer had any expression of pain on his face. His entire body was being torn apart. Every cell was being repeatedly torn apart, reformed, and torn apart. Under such circumstances, a mere shoulder explosion was nothing. It was just a small matter. So strong, Yi Shiwen said. Originally, he had no way of injuring the Moon City Lord, but he had the gung metal ancestral chi in his hand. The gung metal ancestral chi could both attack and defend. Otherwise, he would not have lasted until now. He would have been killed by the Moon City Lord long ago. Even if he had not been killed, he would not have been able to withstand the explosion of the supreme ancestral symbol's energy. He would have exploded and died. The Moon City Lord's expression was extremely ugly. His injuries were recovering quickly, But the speed of recovery was not as fast as expected. With his strength, he should have been able to recover quickly no matter what kind of attack he suffered. But in reality, his recovery was very slow. Although it was still recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye, it was far from his peak instantaneous recovery. The reason for this was the long blade in Yi Shiwen's hand. If it weren't for this long blade, Yi Shiwen wouldn't have been able to pose a fatal threat to him. After all, Yi Shiwen's surge was only the energy that wasn't easy to deal with. And although that energy was difficult to deal with, it was only difficult to deal with. The real threat was the long saber. Earlier, Xiao Chun was torn into pieces, injuring his essence and not recovering yet. Furthermore, the metal-attributed laws in this saber were simply too tyrannical. He had never seen such tyrannical metal-attributed laws before. This was completely different from the metal-attributed laws of the martial epic. The metal-attributed laws of the martial epic had been integrated when the world was created. The so-called 5 elements reinforced and restrained each other. This was also the law of the martial epic. However, the heptagold epic was different. That was a place where only metal-attributed laws existed. Everything evolved from the heptagold origin. There was no such thing as mutual promotion or restraint. The heptagold origin was everything. Hence, it was incredibly ferocious, more than 10 times more tyrannical than the metal-attributed laws of the martial epic. Even the purest metal elemental essence in the world was not as pure as the Gungjin ancestral qi. It was not a Dao item, but in terms of sharpness, it was more terrifying than ordinary Dao items. Even the Moon City Lord had never seen it before. It was definitely a remnant from the ancient epic. Furthermore, the Moon City Lord thought about how the Middle Heavenly Venerate had succeeded in becoming a Middle Heavenly Venerate by destroying the heptagold epic, becoming the Vice Emperor of the Fortune Divine Dynasty. He already had some understanding of the origins of this saber. He also coveted it. If he had such a saber back then, he would have been able to break the Middle Heavenly Venerate's seal. Then, he would not have been sealed by the Middle Heavenly Venerate. He might have even been able to pose a threat to the Middle Heavenly Venerate and turn the tables. However, he had no other choice now. He had to eliminate the huge threat that was Yi Shiwen first. Ha ha, I think you are really out of your mind. To think that you want to exchange injuries with me. Can you beat me? The Moon City Lord laughed heartily. As a peak celestial master, his recovery ability was above Yi Shiwen's. Moreover, Yi Shiwen could die in his own hands at any time. Yet, he still dared to play the game of exchanging injuries with him. It had to be known that only those with stronger physical bodies and stronger recovery abilities would make such a choice. Humph! Yi Shiwen did not say anything and continued to attack. Since you want to die, then I will fulfill your wish. The Moon City Lord's fighting spirit also soared. Ever since he became the Moon City Lord, he had rarely fought so fiercely. Yi Shiwen had already stimulated the ferocious fighting spirit in the depths of his heart. The Moon City Lord attacked again. He held the bright moon in his hand and faced Yi Shiwen. Boom, boom, boom. Loud explosions rang out. In an instant, the two sides had exchanged thousands of moves. Neither of them knew how many times they had been hit by each other. The attacks of the Moon City Lord continued to fall on Yi Shiwen's body, tearing open his flesh again and again. Blood splattered everywhere, and bone fragments flew everywhere. However, his counterattack was equally sharp. Relying on a long blade formed from Gung metal ancestral qi, he repeatedly left huge wounds on the Moon City Lord's body. Both sides had already lost themselves in the fight. It could be said that this was almost a dead end for Yi Shiwen. However, it was not much better for the Moon City Lord. After Yi Shiwen's torment, his vitality was greatly damaged. He did not know how long it would take for him to fully recover. In his opinion, Yi Shiwen was like a crazy, ferocious beast that wanted to bite off a piece of flesh from his body, even if he died. However, he didn't notice that Yi Shiwen had taken away all of his flesh and blood. Even if he saw it, he wouldn't care about it. After all, it was just a little bit of flesh and blood. Who would care about it when such a big battle was about to break out? Moreover, Yishuin did not know how many pieces of flesh and bones had flown out his body. It was even more serious than the Moon City Lord's. Yishuin seemed to be unable to hold on any longer. He was on the verge of collapse, and his entire body was covered in blood. It was unknown how much heavenly venerate blood he had lost. Any bit of this blood could be sold for a sky-high price in the outside world. Wu Zun, you have reached the final moment. Watch me send you on your final journey. The Moon City Lord could already see that Yi Shiwen had reached his limit. One more time, and he would die. Do you really think I have reached the end of my road? Yi Shiwen snorted coldly. You still dare to be stubborn? Do you think you can hide your situation from me? Do you still have the ability? The Moon City Lord could naturally see that Yi Shiwen was simply an arrow at the end of its flight. He laughed out loud. Although there were countless scars on his body at this time, he was still much better than Yi Shiwen. Idiot, haven't you discovered it yet? The corners of Yi Shiwen's mouth drew back. He felt an incomparable pain, but he still pulled out a smile and said, Discovered what? The Moon City Lord couldn't understand, but he immediately discovered the problem that Yi Shiwen mentioned because he didn't know when Yi Shiwen had already appeared in front of him. In order to avoid being ambushed by Yi Shiwen again, he had been maintaining a certain distance from Yi Shiwen since the first time he had been ambushed. Although he was not weak in terms of close combat, he was not stupid either. He could also see that Yi Shiwen was stronger and more terrifying than him in this aspect. At this time, he naturally would not use his weakness to attack the enemy's strength. For a heavenly venerate, a battle of life and death could be considered face-to-face even if they were thousands of miles apart. This was because the attack power of a heavenly venerate was really terrifying. In the Fortune God dynasty, a heavenly venerate's attack range could even cover a small half of the eastern region. Although it could not cover the entire eastern region, that was also because the eastern region was too vast. It was as vast as smoke and simply immeasurable. However, if the movement ability of a heavenly venerate was taken into account, it would not be wrong to say that a heavenly venerate could cover the entire eastern region with their attacks. But now, the distance between him and Yi Shiwen was less than 1,000 miles. This distance was simply the distance of a sneak attack. Originally, this was nothing. Yi Shiwen could sneak attack him from this position, and he could also sneak attack Yi Shiwen. It was really not a big deal. However, Yi Shiwen's words gave him a strong sense of crisis. It was only 1,000 miles. Sure enough, Yi Shiwen had just finished speaking when his figure had already arrived in front of the Moon City Lord. Not good. The Moon City Lord immediately understood why Yi Shiwen acted so abnormally before. Yi Shiwen actually traded injuries with him despite being seriously injured. In the beginning, the Moon City Lord speculated that Yi Shiwen was like a crazy, fierce beast at this time, fighting like a cornered beast. He wanted to bite off a piece of flesh from his body, even if he died. However, it seemed that this was not the case at all. Yi Shiwen had long prepared for this. This was simply his plan. He had used a series of violent battles to lower his vigilance to the lowest level. So much so that he was actually unaware of Yi Shiwen's approach. Such a distance was simply nothing in a battle. And this was the illusion that Yi Shiwen wanted him to have. The Moon City Lord, who suddenly understood, felt a chill down his spine. However, it was too late. Yi Shiwen had already arrived in front of him. The Martial Supreme Seal flew out from the top of his head and transformed into the Fortune Realm. It immediately suppressed the Moon City Lord. Even if it was only for a short period of time, it was enough for him. Universe Creation Palm. Yi Shiwen's palm fell and slapped the Moon City Lord. Although the Moon City Lord's physical body was extremely strong, it was useless in front of the Universe Creation Palm that could reverse his strength. It directly exploded. However, this was only the first step. Immediately after, the long saber formed by the Gung Metal Ancestral Chi instantly slashed down. A white saber light slashed out and blasted into the Moon City Lord's body. Seeing that the Moon City Lord's spirit was about to be destroyed by the saber, he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood essence. His entire body instantly turned into a stream of light and disappeared. Martial Supreme, just you wait. I will definitely not let you go. Chapter 35:12. Yi Shiwen could not help but heave a sigh of relief as he watched the Moon City Lord flee. At this time, the Moon City Lord was already on the verge of death. The previous exchange of injuries was just a strategy that Yi Shiwen had come up with, and that final blow was the real trump card. Yi Shiwen had concentrated all of his martial power to inflict serious injuries on the Moon City Lord, allowing him to escape. However, Yi Shiwen felt somewhat regretful in his heart. He had thought that he would be able to kill the Moon City Lord, but the reality was that he had only managed to inflict serious injuries on him. The Moon City Lord was on his last breath. Although he had used a secret technique to escape at the cost of damaging his great Tao foundation, Yi Shiwen could still catch up and kill him if he was at his peak. In fact, Yi Shiwen himself was already on the verge of death. He might even be weaker than the Moon City Lord. However, the Moon City Lord, who had already been frightened by Yi Shiwen, would not turn back. Although he had guessed that Yi Shiwen might be an arrow at the end of its flight, he did not dare take the risk. This was because he had already misjudged many times before. Each time, he thought that Yi Shiwen should be an arrow at the end of its flight and would definitely die. However, Yi Shiwen always exceeded his expectations. Little by little, he went from a state of no injuries to minor injuries, serious injuries, and finally dying. All of this was premeditated by Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen's deep thoughts shocked him. He could not see through how many trump cards Yi Shiwen had. Only someone whose trump cards could not be seen through could make the Moon City Lord so afraid. Even if he had guessed some of Yi Shiwen's current situation, he did not dare to return. He would not even admit that he was afraid of Yi Shiwen. Huff, huff, huff. Yi Shiwen panted heavily. After confirming that the Moon City Lord would not return, he heaved a sigh of relief. He, who had withdrawn from the state of Human 1, felt extremely weak. At this time, his body seemed to have been swept by a storm. Countless cells were torn apart, and his meridians were in a mess. His internal organs were in severe pain, and it was difficult to even mobilize his magic power. Now, his skills were almost falling from the heavenly venerate realm. Not to mention being invincible in the past. Almost any heavenly venerate could kill him now. Even a peak Imperial Lord had such a possibility. With such a serious injury, even his Phoenix regeneration technique couldn't heal it in a short period of time. There was still the violent energy of the supreme ancestral symbol remaining in his body. It wouldn't be possible to remove it in a short period of time. He finally understood why Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable was so weak back then, so weak that even a fourth realm demon Venerable could chase him to the brink of death. It wasn't that she was too weak, but the side effects of using the supreme ancestral symbol were too great. The supreme ancestral symbol was indeed very powerful, but the side effects were too severe. Yi Shiwen's realm was very strong. Moreover, he had refined the seventh metal ancestral qi. Otherwise, his body would have exploded and he would have died. After resting for a while and recovering some spiritual power, Yi Shiwen immediately decided to leave this place. He wasn't afraid that the blood that filled the sky would attract the ferocious beasts in the chaos because he had already retrieved it. Especially his own. Each drop required 100 years to refine. It was too precious. The blood essence of the Moon City Lord was also very precious. Each drop contained a huge amount of energy. Some of the remaining blood essence was already much more energy than the blood essence of an ordinary heavenly venerable. Naturally, Yi Shiwen didn't hesitate to use it to water the world tree. It was only right for the victor to clean up the battlefield. The terrifying aura emitted from the battle between Yi Shiwen and the Moon City Lord was enough to scare away the ferocious beasts of the chaos. For a long time, this place would become a forbidden area for them. They wouldn't dare to approach it. Not to mention that the sweeping laws turned into various martial arts attacks that patrolled the entire battlefield. It was as if the battle between Yi Shiwen and the Moon City Lord was still going on. It would never stop. It would be entangled and fight for eternity. They were like their predecessors in the past. A great battle left an everlasting battlefield. If the ferocious beasts barged in, they would undoubtedly die. It was impossible for them to survive. After countless years, this place might evolve into an extremely dangerous place and become a target for future generations to explore. As they continued to explore legends, they had already started to leave legends and myths for future generations. However, Yishuan knew that the Moon City Lord and the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable had already joined forces. Although the Moon City Lord was forced to flee, the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable was still unharmed. If Yishuan continued to stay, even if he wouldn't be harassed by the ferocious beasts of the chaos, the probability of encountering the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable was definitely 100%. However, Yishuan was somewhat lost in this chaos. He didn't know where he had run into the chaos while fleeing. There was no direction in the chaos. Up, down, left, right, north, south, east, west. None of these directions existed here. Yishuan could only use the location of the martial epoch to determine his direction. However, he could no longer sense the location of the martial epoch. On one hand, it was indeed because he had run too far earlier. Heavenly Venerables were rushing at full speed in the opposite direction of the martial epoch. This period of time was enough for him to run far enough. On the other hand, he was too weak now. His magic power wasn't even 1% of his peak. This position was already beyond his limits. No matter what, it is most important to leave this place first. Yishuan exited from the state of merging with one. His external injuries had mostly recovered. From the outside, he seemed to have returned to his usual appearance. However, only he knew how serious his internal injuries were. Not even half a day had passed after Yishuan had left when a figure swept across the entire sky with demonic energy. The remnant attacks and principles of both sides on the battlefield were nothing in front of this person. That pair of eyes revealed extreme power and evilness. If Yishuan were here, he would recognize that this person was none other than the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerate. Everything was as Yishuan expected. After the Moon City Lord fled, he ran into the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerate. The Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerate had just escaped from the Sun City Lord's encirclement and damaged some of his foundations. However, when he saw the Moon City Lord in this state, he was still shocked. When a Moon City Lord presided over Moon City, many ancient epics experts suffered at his hands. The Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerate had fought with the Moon City Lord before. Naturally, he understood that the Moon City Lord was not someone easy to deal with. What kind of person could beat up the Moon City Lord to such a state? This was simply incredible. At that time, the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerate even had some greedy thoughts. He wanted to kill the Moon City Lord on the spot to make up for his losses. After devouring the Moon City Lord's origin energy, he might even be able to advance further. The Moon City Lord clearly saw through the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerate's thoughts. In reality, the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerate was working with the demonic Tao epoch. However, that did not mean that he did not know the demonic Tao epoch style of doing things. When useful, the demonic Tao epoch would treat the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerate with respect. However, if the demonic Tao epoch was useless, only death awaited. When it came to turning hostile and being heartless, it could be said to be the best among the many epochs. How could he not be on guard at all? He sneered at the Scarlet Serpent Demon Elder. If the Scarlet Serpent Demon Elder dared to attack him, he would rather self-destruct than let the Scarlet Serpent Demon Elder succeed. It would be better for him to die in Yishuan's hands than to be swallowed by the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable. He had painstakingly escaped from Yishuan's hands. However, he didn't want to be swallowed by the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable. The Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerate also saw the determination of the City Lord of Moon City. He knew that a person of that level would at least have this much willpower. He immediately gave up on the idea of attacking. Furthermore, Moon City Lord was someone that the demonic path epic Empyreans had discussed in order to be rescued. He could be considered a benchmark. This would allow the people of the other epochs to see the benefits of working with them and relying on them. If they killed him now, then the demonic epic's reputation would be tarnished. This was because Moon City's city lord was not an ordinary sovereign emperor or empyrean. If he died, then so be it. No one would care. He was a super expert whose name shook countless epics. There were not many people like him in the entire martial epic. Even such a person was killed by the demonic path epic. At that time, who would dare to rely on the demonic path epic? It would not be in line with the demonic path epic strategy. Hence, even the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable could only give up. However, the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable learned from the Moon City Lord that the other person he fought was Yi Shiwen, who was severely injured and on the verge of death. Although the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable did not have a deep impression of Yi Shiwen, there was one thing that was enough to change his opinion of Yi Shiwen. To think that the arrogant Moon City Lord had been beaten to such a state. If the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable had not seen it for himself, he would not have believed it. How could such a person be simple? Yi Shiwen would definitely become a major character of the martial epic in the future. This made the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable want to kill Yi Shiwen. He quickly comforted the Moon City's city lord and got the Demon Venerates under him to take care of the city lord. Then, he personally rushed to the place the Moon City's city lord had indicated. If Yi Shiwen had not left yet, he would kill Yi Shiwen and resolve this problem in one fell swoop. Unfortunately, Yi Shiwen was not stupid enough to stay behind and let the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable kill him. Hence, when the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable arrived, he could only see that the entire primal chaos was a mess from the fight between the two sides. From the traces of the fight and the divine laws flying in the sky, the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable could imagine how intense the fight between the two sides had been. The Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable could even vaguely deduce some parts of the fight from the traces. His fear of Yi Shiwen continued to increase. He used such a secret technique, so he must be severely injured. He could not have gotten far. Pass down my orders. Have the demonic path epic battlefield arranged for people to be stationed on the main roads. Once they find a martial venerable, kill him immediately without question. The Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable waved his hand, and a talisman flew out. It carried his will and entered the primal chaos. The Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable stood firmly on the battlefield where the two fought. His eyes flickered with a bright light. No one knew what he was thinking. Chapter 35:13. It was an ancient city with an unimaginable age. No one could tell the origin of the layout of this city. The city walls were engraved with the marks of time. Time had left mottled traces on them, but they still stood tall in the primal chaos. To build a city in the primal chaos without the protection of the laws of heaven and earth, this was more difficult than ascending to the heavens. Even with the might of the Fortune Heavenly Monarch and the wealth of the Fortune Divine Dynasty, they only managed to build one of the 10 great divine cities. The others were just satellite cities that relied on the protection of the laws of the 10 great divine cities to survive. And this 7 absolute city was such a city. It had existed for a very long time, even longer than the 10 great divine cities. No one knew when it was built. They only knew that this 7 absolute city had been here for as long as people could remember, and it had already been sculpted by time. No one had seen it when it was built. There were even more shocking rumors that this city had already appeared at the beginning of the martial epic. Since time immemorial, its location had never changed, as if it had existed for eternity in the primal chaos. Some people even speculated that this 7 absolute city might be a creation from a few epics before. But even if it was an antique from a few epics before, what they said was even more shocking. This was because this 7 absolute city had already existed several epics before. It was just that it had been too long. After experiencing the great apocalypse again and again, many antiques had either died or fallen into a deep slumber. Many of the super powerhouses of the ancient epics had actually only achieved the Tao in the recent epics. Every time the great apocalypse occurred, those below the Emperor realm would basically be annihilated. Emperor realm emperors would find it hard to protect themselves. Although heavenly venerables could protect themselves, many of them died. Hence, when mentioning the Great Apocalypse, Heavenly Venerable's expressions would change. It was unimaginably terrifying. On the other hand, this seven absolute city was able to survive time and time again from the great apocalypse of the heavens and the earth as if it hadn't changed since time immemorial. This undoubtedly caused many people to guess that there was definitely an extraordinary expert residing in this city. In fact, this city did indeed have its own order. Some powerhouses of the ancient epochs had settled down here and become the natives of this place. Slowly, they had become the guardians of this place. This seven absolute city had also slowly become a trading city for information and resources between the various ancient epochs. As a result, it had become extremely prosperous. Even the powerful demonic epoch hadn't set their sights on the seven absolute city. It wasn't because of how terrifying the natives in this city were, but because of the strength of the rumored seven absolute city lord, the seven absolute city lord. According to the ancient legends, when the seven absolute city was first established, it had indeed been besieged by the joint forces of several ancient epochs. How could an ordinary city lord compare to the ancient epochs? Seven absolute city lords' army. Just one seven absolute city lord could take it. However, under the circumstances of these great ancient epochs joining hands, seven absolute city still stood tall. It was even to the extent where at the most crucial moment, a matchless figure took action. With his own strength, he defeated the joint forces of these few people and killed countless experts. In the end, these people suffered great losses and directly retreated. This person was the legendary seven absolute city lord. He was also the person who wielded real power in the entire seven absolute city. No one knew the origin of the seven absolute city lord. They only knew that he was very strong. He was unimaginably strong. No one could do anything to him. Although no one in the seven absolute city could find the seven absolute city lord's figure, just his original reputation was enough to make everyone stop. Unless it was confirmed that the seven absolute city lord had fallen, no one would dare to make a move even if they coveted the wealth. Therefore, this had become a place that people from various epochs liked to come to. They could exchange information and resources. They could exchange many resources that they didn't need for ordinary times for resources that they needed. Anyone who could come here, even an ordinary person who was casually walking around, was at least at the emperor level. It was impossible for those who weren't emperors to cross the chaos. Those who weren't emperors were basically the descendants of the local native powerhouses. As for those with some status, it was basically only possible for heavenly masters. Yishiwen was sitting cross-legged on a cloud bed in a room of the largest inn in the city. He was constantly breathing. After a long time, he slowly opened his eyes. There was a bit of joy in his eyes, but also a bit of a bitter smile. He simply didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What made him happy was that he had gained a lot from the battle with the city lord of Moon City. He had originally thought that he would need a long time to truly cross the barrier of the fifth realm. He had made a breakthrough. In the battle with the city lord of Moon City, Yishiwen was able to fight evenly with him with the help of the human unification state. Yishiwen had even seriously injured him in the end. However, at the same time, he had also used this power to let him experience the glory of a higher-level heavenly master realm in advance. He had seen many realms that he had never seen before. Of course, there was no way for him to record everything during the battle. However, he could rely on the mysterious space to completely record everything. Every minute and every second, he would be able to record everything and refine it. Since it was a battle of a higher level, every punch and every kick was a new kind of understanding for Yishiwen. Now, those insights that he didn't have time to think about during the previous battle, after being analyzed by the mysterious space, suddenly poured into his mind like a tide. The barrier that he had originally felt was extremely difficult and impossible to break through collapsed under this tide-like understanding. Therefore, Yishiwen broke through from the fourth realm to the fifth realm almost without any difficulty. This might be the easiest breakthrough he had experienced ever since he had cultivated to the Empyrean realm. His foundation was strong enough, and he had also forcibly comprehended his insights in battle. Everything was ready. All that was left was to simply push the boat along with the current. Just like that, he broke through to the fifth realm so easily. There was no difficulty at all. This battle was almost equivalent to him cultivating for thousands of years, or even tens of thousands of years. Of course, this was also because his previous accumulation was indeed sufficient. He had reached the peak of the fifth realm. Otherwise, it would have been impossible in any case. Originally, stepping into the fifth realm should have made him extremely happy. With his current strength, if he stepped into the fifth realm, his fighting strength would also push the boat with the current and step into the sixth realm. Yi Shiwen was almost invincible and fearless except for high-level heavenly masters above the seventh realm. One step further, and he would become a heavenly master of the seventh realm. Then, he would truly be qualified to compete for the position of Eastern Heavenly Master. He wouldn't have to rely on the recommendation of a Middle Heavenly Master. Just like a Middle Heavenly Master, he could compete for the position of Eastern Heavenly Master. In fact, no one even recommended him for the position of Middle Heavenly Master. The only reason was that he was strong enough. At his level of strength, it was more useful than any recommendation. However, dreams were beautiful. The reality was that although he had a breakthrough in his realm, his injuries hadn't healed yet. After a month of recuperation, he had only recovered a little. If it was said that he could casually encounter a heavenly master before, then his current strength was at least equivalent to the strength of a heavenly master first realm. Although it was already not bad, it was still too far away from his current realm. How could he be satisfied? Moreover, this seven absolute city was deep in the primal chaos, far away from the epic battlefield. He didn't feel safe at all. Previously, he had been in a panic. That was why he had come to this seven absolute city. He had used the supreme ancestral symbol to conceal his aura and disguised himself as an expert from the ancient epic. As a person from the martial epic, if he came to this seven absolute city with his original appearance, he would inevitably be targeted. Although the seven absolute city had never said that people from a martial epic were not allowed to come, this was almost a tacit rule. This was the territory of the people from the ancient epic. As an expert from the current martial epic, he wouldn't normally come here if there was no reason. Moreover, since the ancient epic and the martial epic had fought until now, many experts had fallen. Both sides already had a deep hatred for each other. It would be very difficult to resolve it. Yi Shiwen wasn't interested in resolving it. It was all for the sake of survival. He wasn't afraid when he was at his peak. Even if others wanted to make a move on him, they would have to see if they had the strength to do so. Now that he was seriously injured, he had to be careful. It was best to be careful. After breaking through to the fifth realm, Yi Shiwen's recovery speed had increased slightly. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made such progress in a month. According to his original estimation, it would take more than a few decades or even 100 years to recover to this point. After his realm increased, his understanding of many martial arts also soared. His recovery speed was much faster. Now, I barely have the strength to protect myself. If I want to recover completely, I won't be able to do it in a short time. I can't stay in this seven absolute city forever. I have to find a way to buy a primal chaos map and return to the epic battlefield. Yi Shiwen immediately decided to buy a primal chaos map before leaving. Although he couldn't tell the direction in the primal chaos, it was different. With a primal chaos map in hand, the location of some cities, some places where ferocious primal chaos beasts roamed, and many taboos and important points would be marked on it. For Yi Shiwen, who was currently seriously injured, this was naturally very important. After making up his mind, Yi Shiwen directly got off the cloud bed, pushed open the door, and left the isolated space of this room. Then, he casually laid down a formation to prevent people from barging in. Only then did he go downstairs. Chapter 35:14. From the outside, this inn looked like an ordinary inn. It only had 2 floors, but in reality, the space inside was very large. It was divided into many inner spaces, and it could accommodate tens of thousands of people at the same time without any pressure. This was the largest inn in the entire 7 Absolute City. Experts from various ancient eras would come to the 7 Absolute City and stay there. After going downstairs, Yishuan immediately called the waiter in the inn. This waiter was also a local native. Yishuan didn't know what race he was from. Most of his body was actually translucent. "What can I do for you, sir?" the waiter said quickly and attentively. Although he didn't know the origin of the person in front of him, he was very clear that the guests who could cross the chaos to come here were not ordinary people. "It's like this. I want to ask if there's any place in this 7 Absolute City that sells chaos maps?" asked Yishuan. He knew that rather than searching around aimlessly in this 7 Absolute City, it couldn't be any better to ask these well-informed attendants. "Dear customer, you've asked the right person. The Primal Chaos map isn't sold in most places. However, as far as I know, someone is selling the Primal Chaos map in the biggest grocery market in the city," the waiter said. Then, he enthusiastically pointed out the direction of the grocery market. "Yes, this is your reward." Yishuan casually threw a reward to the waiter. The waiter immediately shed tears of gratitude and repeatedly thanked him. Who was Yishuan? He was a high and mighty celestial master. Even if it was just a casual reward, it was a huge surprise for the waiter whose cultivation had not even reached the Tao confirmation realm. When he came back to his senses again, he found that Yishuan had disappeared in front of him. He disappeared directly from the lobby. At this time, there were people coming and going in the lobby, but no one saw how Yishuan disappeared. They just felt that he disappeared in a flash. Many people couldn't help but imprint the face they saw just now into their hearts. They knew that this was another person they couldn't afford to provoke. They first remembered the appearance, so that they wouldn't be unaware if they offended someone next time. Many of these people were powerful figures from the ancient era. Being able to cross the primal chaos, they were naturally extraordinary. However, they also knew that they couldn't provoke some big shots. Otherwise, they wouldn't even know how they died. When Yishuan reappeared, he was already in the grocery market. The reason why it was called a grocery market was because all kinds of sundries were being sold here. This was a market that was formed spontaneously, and no one in the 7 Absolute City came to manage it. So anything could be bought here. But similarly, if one was blind and was cheated, there was no place to reason with. Everything depended on one's own ability. Those who could come here to buy things were basically people with good eyesight. But what was more rare was to be able to deceive these experts under their noses. "It's quite interesting," Yishuan said with a slight smile. Yishuan had just entered the bazaar, and with his acute hearing ability, he could hear the shouts of the stall owners. Although it was noisy at this time, and there were countless noises, but it was not difficult for him. In a flash, he had already understood most of the things being sold at the many stalls in the entire bazaar. His eyes suddenly lit up. Most of the things here were not worthy of his attention. Even though many of them were rare treasures for ordinary sovereign emperors, they were of little value to him. However, one person's shouts completely aroused his interest. "One wood azure dragon from the green wood epoch. If you want it, please contact me. It can cure all diseases. It's a bargain." Wood azure dragon? Some information about the wood azure dragon suddenly appeared in Yishuan's mind. This wood azure dragon was a supreme treasure of the green wood epoch. It was extremely rare, even in the entire green wood epoch. Like the 7th gold epoch, the green wood epoch was also a part of the 5 Elements Epoch Alliance. It was also the source of all the wood-attributed laws in the current martial epoch. This wood azure dragon was a kind of natural treasure that was born from the green wood origin of the green wood epoch. Although it was called the wood azure dragon, it was not a living creature, or rather, a living creature that had yet to transform. The wood azure dragon was able to heal any injuries on the body and increase one's cultivation. It was undoubtedly a rare treasure. Anyone who obtained it would probably not give it up easily. Moreover, if this wood azure dragon had enough opportunities and was not caught by others, it could ascend to become a dragon after going through many tribulations. Once this kind of wood azure dragon became a dragon, it would immediately become the equivalent of a sovereign emperor. It was extremely incredible. The world was fair. Treasures of heaven and earth like the Woodwood Azure Dragon would encounter layers upon layers of tribulations once they reached a certain stage from birth, and they would attract all sorts of external tribulations. Just the competition between the powerhouses had already caused a treasure like the Woodwood Azure Dragon to be unable to survive until it took form. It could be said that in the entire Green Wood epic, only 2 or 3 Wood Azure Dragons managed to ascend to become a dragon. However, without exception, all of them became major characters in the Greenwood epic. Although this race was small, every one of them was a major character. This was also the embodiment of the fairness of the world. Due to the many tribulations, once it took form, it would be a world-shaking existence. However, if something like the Wood Azure Dragon appeared in the martial epic, it would attract many heavenly venerates to fight for it. It was extremely precious. Now, it was actually selling it on the street. It could be said that the things sold on the street might not be as precious as this Wood Azure Dragon. With this thought in mind, Yishuin took a step forward and went straight to the front of this stall. The owner of this stall was a humanoid creature with a pair of wings on his ribs. His mouth was like an eagle's beak, but it was the hardest part of his entire body. He had already advanced into the Sovereign Emperor realm and was quite extraordinary. However, in front of Yishuin, it was still not enough. Friend, you are also here to see the Wood Azure Dragon, right? You really have good taste. The stall owner quickly came forward and said, the Wood Azure Dragon was indeed precious, but the problem was that it was too precious. Ordinary people would be scared to death just by hearing its name. They would not dare to say that they would buy it. As for robbing it by force, that would be a joke. Although no one cared about it here, the 7 Absolute City still had basic rules. Otherwise, who would dare to do business here? The 7 Absolute City could repel the joint attacks of several ancient eras, although it relied on the supreme strength of the 7 Absolute Sage. The strength that the 7 Absolute City possessed was enough for many people to think twice. Many of the surrounding stall owners looked at Yishuin with interest and a bit of pity in their eyes. Yishuin was a little confused, but when he really looked at this Wood Azure Dragon, he found the problem. This Wood Azure Dragon was actually dead. Although this Wood Azure Dragon was full of wood chi from the appearance, and it was about the size of an arm, it seemed lifelike, and it would fly out of the small box that contained it at any time. In fact, the vitality inside had been cut off. Someone had used a secret technique to stimulate the remaining wood chi in it. This technique was very impressive. Ordinary emperors might not be able to see it, and only celestial masters might be able to see it. No wonder. Yishuin suddenly understood. He immediately understood. No wonder he said to sell it cheaply. If the price was too high, it would attract celestial masters. With the eyesight of the celestial masters, they might be able to see through his tricks. If he sold it to the emperors, ordinary emperors might not be able to afford it. So, he might as well sell it cheaply. He probably looked at Yishuin's current appearance and thought that he was only an emperor. If he was a celestial master, he would not look like this. With the aura of a celestial master, he could feel it from far away. Moreover, there was no need for a celestial master to pretend in front of him. No wonder the surrounding stall owners would spread out like this. They probably already knew about it. However, no one reminded Yishuin, since they were just cleaning the snow in front of their own door and not caring about the frost on other people's roof. It was simply a joke to cheat him with such a little trick. When Yishuin was about to turn around and leave, he suddenly saw a wisp of vitality firmly occupying the center of the Wood Azure Dragon's seemingly lifeless core. It was protecting its origin. If he hadn't carefully looked at it, he would have missed it. Yishuin didn't take a closer look at it. How can there be vitality in such a core? Yishuin suddenly frowned slightly, revealing a somewhat suspicious look. The stall owner saw Yishuin revealing a somewhat suspicious look and suddenly thought that Yishuin had seen through some flaws and had some doubts. He couldn't help but quickly said, Taoist friend, this is the Wood Azure Dragon. This is the treasure of the Greenwood era. I also used a lot of methods to get it. You can't see it anywhere else. Since Taoist friend has come to ask, you must know something about the Wood Azure Dragon. You should know its magical power. Now, I also have some urgent matters to deal with and need to get rid of it. Otherwise, I won't sell such a good thing. I also see that Taoist friend seems to be quite sincere, so I said so much to you. This is a good opportunity. If you miss it, there won't be another one. You can't find a second wood azure dragon, even if you turn the entire 7 absolute city upside down. After swallowing this wood azure dragon, you will at least advance by 1 realm. Even your physical body will be able to change into the innate green wood body. Even if you don't swallow it immediately, if you keep it, it may even transform and transform. Then, it will be a supreme treasure. Yi Shiwen wasn't affected by the stall owner's incessant introduction. Suddenly, the stall owner's words made him understand something in an instant. Chapter 35:15. Yes, it was the words of the stall owner that made him suddenly think of something. This wood azure dragon's vitality was obviously gone, as if it had suffered a serious injury. But in fact, there was still a strand of vitality that protected the core origin from beginning to end. This itself was unreasonable. He now suddenly understood that this was probably because this wood azure dragon was transforming and was about to ascend to become a dragon. Although he had never seen how the wood azure dragon ascended to become a dragon, and there were too few successful wood azure dragons in the Greenwood era, and each of them was a big shot, no one dared to investigate, so not many people knew. However, Yi Shiwen had seen many heavenly treasures like this. They had reached the final moment and were undergoing the final transformation. They had condensed all of their vitality in the origin at the critical moment, and were waiting for the transformation. They were waiting to ascend into a dragon. From the appearance, it was naturally no different from being dead, so even the stall owner didn't see it. He only thought that he found a dead wood azure dragon. He didn't know where he found a method to reactivate the wood chi of this wood azure dragon, pretending that it was still alive, ready to cheat people. But he didn't think that it was simply buying the casket and returning the pearls. However, there was a wisp of vitality in the depths of the second wood azure dragon's origin. Yi Shiwen immediately understood the reason behind it. Perhaps this second wood azure dragon's transformation had reached the final moment, and it was about to ascend to become a dragon. Therefore, a crack had appeared in its origin, and a wisp of vitality had leaked out from it. In fact, this appearance that was like a dead wood was a self-protection method of the wood azure dragon. If there was really no vitality, then naturally it would not be perceived by others, and it could protect itself to the greatest extent. It was a pity that this wood azure dragon's luck was obviously not very good. Even so, it was still found. Now, it was finally the time to ascend to become a dragon. It was a pity that if it didn't meet Yi Shiwen, then it might still be possible. After figuring out the key in this, Yi Shiwen immediately said, "How much is this wood azure dragon worth? You name a price." Hearing Yi Shiwen's words, the stall owner suddenly revealed a somewhat ecstatic look, while the surrounding stall owners revealed a somewhat pitiful look, apparently thinking that Yi Shiwen had finally been fooled and had been deceived by others. The stall owner tried his best to hold back the ecstasy in his heart and said with great difficulty, "I only need an Imperial Lord Dao artifact, or wealth of equivalent value." He didn't know how long this wood azure dragon had been in his possession, but now he finally had a way to get rid of it. Unfortunately, he didn't know what Yi Shiwen was thinking. In fact, if this stall owner had kept this second wood azure dragon in his hands for some time, the vitality of this second wood azure dragon would have become more and more intense, and he would have become more and more aware of it. Perhaps he wouldn't have sold it like this. All right, Yi Shiwen didn't want to complicate matters. A mere sovereign Taoist tool was nothing to him. He immediately took out a long saber from his inner world. This was also left behind by the Emperor Lord he had killed, and he was now using it to exchange for the Emu Green Dragon. The stall owner said with a smile on his face, "You really have a good eye, fellow Taoist." He took the long saber, and after putting it away, he handed the second wood azure dragon to Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen finally couldn't help but reveal a smile on his face when he received the second wood azure dragon. Originally, he was still very distressed about his injuries. Now that the second wood azure dragon was bestowed upon him, it was equivalent to the heavens helping him. With the help of the second wood azure dragon, he should be able to recover very quickly. He wouldn't miss the battle to reclaim the Moon City this time, since he already had the intention to compete for the position of Eastern Heavenly Lord. Then he had to do something practical. As a major event in the next period of time, reclaiming the Moon City would probably not be as important as this for a long time. Such a matter was the time to gain credit. So how could he shrink back? For those who were afraid of trouble, the battle to reclaim the Moon City was full of dangers, and they might die if they were not careful. However, for people like Yishuin, it was a good place to make contributions. Moreover, Yishuin was very clear that although the Devil era seemed very strong and could lead many ancient eras, in reality, it was still incomparable to the current era like the martial era. Even though the Devil era had not reached the point of struggling for survival, every once in a while, the great shattering of heaven and earth would severely injure them. They needed to recuperate for a long time. Otherwise, people wouldn't even need to grow at all. They would immediately be attacked by the older ancient eras. The Fortune God dynasty had spent too much energy to suppress the foreign creatures. Most of the energy was actually used to suppress the foreign creatures to ensure that the Fortune God dynasty's territory did not collapse. Otherwise, with the power of the Fortune God dynasty, they could counterattack the ancient era. Even if they didn't use tricks like the Middle Heavenly Lord back then, they could still uproot the Devil era by force. It was just that they would have to pay a similarly painful price. Without the Wood Azure Dragon, with Yishuin's recovery ability, it might take more than 100,000 years to recover from this injury. This time, he had gained a lot of benefits from fighting with the Moon City City Lord. His cultivation had even leaped to the 5th realm. However, in Yishuin's opinion, it could only be regarded as a loss for both sides. As for entering the 5th realm, it could at most be regarded as a blessing in disguise. However, he still couldn't help feeling sullen. The Moon City City Lord was too arrogant. He didn't need any schemes or tricks. He just used absolute strength to crush you. In the face of absolute power, no matter what kind of plan it was useless. However, Yishuin's current strength was indeed inferior to the Moon City Lord. That was why he had used such a method. He had almost been defeated. It could be said that he had narrowly escaped death. He would get his revenge sooner or later. However, there was no other way in the short term. Even if he recovered from his injuries, he probably wouldn't be able to find trouble with the Devil Era's base camp. However, there was still a long way to go. Outstanding heavenly lords like them wouldn't die so easily. Sooner or later, they would meet again. Wait a minute. When Yishuin was about to put the Wood Azure Dragon into his inner world, the stall owner immediately shouted, "I'm not selling it." Yishuin's face suddenly fell, and he looked at him coldly. The surrounding stall owners couldn't help but feel a little strange. He had obviously cheated them successfully. Why'd he say he wasn't selling it now? "You brat. I've been hunting geese all day, but I've actually been pecked in the eye by a geese. How dare you trick me?" The stall owner said. His expression was extremely ferocious and a little angry. Obviously, he understood that the Wood Azure Dragon was probably not dead yet. However, he had actually given up such a rare treasure that even heavenly venerables would fight over with just an Imperial Lord-level Dao artifact. He didn't think there was anything wrong with it. Yishuin's face revealed a somewhat happy expression. This was very normal. Who wouldn't be like this after buying the Wood Azure Dragon? He just glanced at the Wood Azure Dragon carefully out of habit. Only then did he realize that something was wrong. There was actually a wisp of vitality in it. That was definitely not caused by him. Although he hadn't thought that deeply, he thought that the Wood Azure Dragon was in close cultivation and would soon ascend to become a dragon. This was a sign that it was about to come out. However, he immediately realized that there was a trick in the middle. He was immediately angry and annoyed. He was an old swindler, but he was actually cheated. What was this? This was a slap in the face, and it was even slapping loudly. What do you want to do? Yishuin immediately understood. Sure enough, the stall owner had seen through him. He handed over obediently. "I won't sell this Wood Azure Dragon. If you hand it over obediently, then everything will be fine. Otherwise, I will make you regret it." You dare to trick me here? You must be tired of living, the stall owner said with a sneer. Oh, it seems that you still have something to rely on, Yi Shiwen said coldly. Although he had used a little trick here, it was actually not a trick. In this place, wasn't it just a matter of looking at the person's eyes? How dare he come out here if he was blind? Moreover, Yi Shiwen's impression of this stall owner was already extremely bad. As a dignified emperor lord and an extreme powerhouse, it was shameful enough to do such a thing. After failing, he actually forcefully snatched it back. Who doesn't have a few trump cards in their hands? It's useless for an outsider like you even if you are strong. If you are a dragon, you have to coil up. If you are a tiger, you have to lie down. This is not a place for you to behave atrociously, the stall owner said coldly. Obviously, he was determined to defeat Yi Shiwen. In his opinion, Yi Shiwen was just a slightly more powerful emperor lord. He had seen many such people, and eventually, he would still suffer a loss. He had deceived too many people. An emperor lord Dao Tool was undoubtedly a windfall for an emperor lord like him. Otherwise, how could an emperor lord like him stoop down to do such a thing? Idiot, Yi Shiwen sneered. I don't care what background you have. There's a saying that you can't afford to offend some people. Today, you are blind not only because of the Emu Azure Dragon, but the price of this matter is your life. What did you say? The stall owner suddenly became furious. At this time, Yi Shiwen still dared to threaten him. Suddenly, he was shocked and angry. But in the next moment, his body suddenly burst open and turned into a cloud of blood mist. The things in his inner world were also taken away by Yi Shiwen. Everyone who saw this scene couldn't help but be silent, because no one knew how Yi Shiwen made his move. They only knew that he took a look, and the stall owner instantly exploded. Yi Shiwen sneered and restored his indifferent expression. Although he was now a tiger in a plain, he had not reached the point of being bullied by a dog. Chapter 35:16. The surrounding stall owners were all silent. Many people realized that they had misjudged. The person in front of them was not a spendthrift. He was clearly a great evil star. The stall owner had been here for a long time. He didn't just sell the Emu Azure Dragon. He had cheated many people, but in the end, no one could do anything to him. It was not only because he was not weak, but also because he had people backing him up. Those who dare to sell fake goods here must have some connections behind them. Those who could come here to buy goods were all tough and ruthless characters. Without some background, they would not be able to stand their ground. But they obviously still underestimated Yi Shiwen. This person was extremely ruthless. He killed an emperor lord casually. Could it be that the person who came was a celestial master? But in the end, they calmed down quickly. Many of them were extreme powerhouses. They could not be shaken no matter how shocked they were. Moreover, in their opinion, it was only a matter of time. If one often walked by the river, one's shoes would get wet. The things sold by ordinary people, even if they were fake, naturally would not attract too terrifying people because they were not so precious. However, things like the wood azure dragon would make a celestial master jealous. It was normal to provoke a tough person. This kind of thing had happened more than once or twice in this bazaar. Most of the people who were cheated could not do anything to them. However, there were always one or two tough people who crushed the deceiving spies. So this matter was very normal. Not only did it test whether the buyer's vision was good, but it also tested whether the seller's vision was right. Who could be provoked and who could not be provoked? Obviously, this stall owner had made an error in judgment. Yi Shiwen seemed ordinary, just like an ordinary emperor monarch. He didn't expect him to be so terrifying. He killed Emperor Monarch with just a glance. He was really tyrannical to the extreme. They did not know that a tiger might not be bullied by a dog. The gap between a peak emperor lord and a celestial master was too big. Moreover, this stall owner was not even a peak emperor lord. Yi Shiwen killed an emperor lord in seconds, as if nothing happened. He left the stall and went to another shop. This shop was where the chaos map was sold. Yi Shiwen had already captured the shouts of countless people the moment he had entered the market. His brain was like a supercomputer, and he was able to sort out the information in an instant. One piece of the primal chaos map was not cheap. It was equivalent to a natural treasure that even sovereign emperors would covet. However, considering that one piece of the primal chaos map could be duplicated continuously, the profit was considerable. In the ancient era, there were countless experts who wanted to cross the primal chaos, and all of them needed this kind of map. Moreover, judging from the fact that no other places were selling the same primal chaos map, it was likely that the owner of this shop was also a powerful and ruthless character. If he wasn't a ruthless character, how could he have explored so many primal chaos regions? Moreover, if he wasn't a ruthless character, this primal chaos map would have already been copied and sold countless times. After all, it was not difficult for sovereign emperors and above to duplicate a portion of the primal chaos map. However, such a thing had not happened. This showed just how ordinary it was. This time, there were no complications, but Yi Shiwen didn't leave the 7 Absolute City. Although he didn't know what kind of background that stall owner had, he didn't care. When he recovered his strength, he could even fight against the 6th Realm Celestial Master. He wouldn't be afraid. What was there to be afraid of? In addition, the 7 Absolute City was the only place with people nearby. It was relatively safe, and he could retreat to heal his injuries. Therefore, he had no other choice. After leaving the market, Yi Shiwen directly teleported back to the inn, to his room. He sat cross-legged on the cloud bed. Yi Shiwen took out the righteous wood azure dragon and erased the wood energy that had forcibly covered its exterior. The righteous wood azure dragon quickly transformed into a withered wood dragon. It seemed as if it had been dead for a long time. If an ordinary person saw it, they might even think that it was a carving with superb craftsmanship. Yi Shiwen spat a mouthful of essence on it, and suddenly this wood azure dragon began to tremble all over. It seemed that Yi Shiwen's essence had forcibly awakened it from its slumber. Wisps of wood chi flew out of the emu green dragon one after another, forming a storm around the smiling emu green dragon. This was the huge wood energy contained in the body of this wood azure dragon. Now, only a small part of it had leaked out, but it made Yi Shiwen feel relaxed all over. The injuries on his body were a little better because he inhaled a mouthful of the huge wood energy emitted by the wood azure dragon. Yi Shiwen sighed, and there was a look of pity on his face because he knew that this wood azure dragon would have the best effect if he had completely transformed and ascended to become a dragon. Although the transformed wood azure dragon was equivalent to a powerful sovereign emperor flying in the sky and burrowing into the ground, it was still far behind Yi Shiwen. It was a pity that he didn't have time to wait now. He must recover from his injuries as soon as possible, otherwise he would miss out on too many things. Under the urging of Yi Shiwen's magic power, the dried skin on the surface of the wood azure dragon's body crumbled inch by inch, revealing its jade-like body. It looked just like a real dragon, vivid and lifelike, and a faint dragon roar could be heard from its body. This wood azure dragon began to swim around Yi Shiwen's body, and every time it swam around Yi Shiwen's body, a huge amount of wood energy would be decomposed from his body and then integrated into Yi Shiwen's body. The extremely bad condition of Yi Shiwen's body, the damaged meridians, the torn cells, began to gradually improve under the nourishment of this endless wood energy. Originally, Yi Shiwen had no way to recover quickly even if he constantly urged his life potential. He could only recover bit by bit, but now with this wood azure dragon, his recovery speed was more than 100 times faster than before. Gradually, Yi Shiwen's complexion looked a lot better, and along with the gradual recovery of his injuries, his martial power also gradually recovered. Celestial Master First Realm, Celestial Master Second Realm, Third Realm, Fourth Realm, Fifth Realm. After an unknown period of time, Yi Shiwen opened his eyes. He finally had the genuine strength of the Fifth Realm, and his injuries had finally recovered. There was a somewhat ecstatic expression on his face. His strength had been completely restored, and it was enough to fight a great master of the Sixth Realm. In addition, although this wood azure dragon consumed most of its power to heal his injuries, there was still a small part left. As long as it was swallowed and digested, it would be enough for Yi Shiwen's cultivation to directly reach the peak of the fifth realm. Moreover, it was not an ordinary peak of the fifth realm. It would be difficult to find an opponent in the fifth realm. The trip to the Seven Absolute City this time was truly rather fruitful. Yi Shiwen opened his mouth and swallowed this much smaller wood azure dragon into his body. This wood azure dragon instantly melted and turned into countless small wood azure dragons. They wandered in his meridians and constantly dissolved, transforming into Yi Shiwen's own martial power. As long as he was given some time, stepping into the peak of the fifth realm would be a piece of cake. This wood azure dragon had saved him more than 100,000 years of time. Yi Shiwen could not wait any longer. He could not wait to return to the era battlefield. He immediately opened the door and went downstairs. At this time, the entire lobby was bustling with people coming and going. However, when they saw Yi Shiwen coming down, everyone's eyes suddenly fell on Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen suddenly felt a little strange. Seeing their complicated expressions and hesitant looks, he was puzzled. However, he quickly settled the bill with the waiter and walked out of the inn. The moment he walked out of the inn, he suddenly felt a terrifying aura sweeping over and directly staring at him on the spot. Yi Shiwen raised his head and suddenly saw a huge figure shrouding the sky above the inn like a dark cloud. This figure transformed into a law world, causing huge pressure to Yi Shiwen. It was a majestic middle-aged man with purple hair. His hair was flying like a burning purple flame. Although Yi Shiwen had never seen this middle-aged man, since he came for him and was here, then this person's identity was obvious. The only person he had offended in Seven Absolute City was probably the person behind the stall owner who sold the wood azure dragon. Yi Shiwen smiled coldly. His figure also rose into the sky and confronted the middle-aged man. The purple-haired middle-aged man took the lead and said coldly, "This is my friend. Even if he did something wrong before, you killed him." "Did I?" Yi Shiwen said with a sneer. "This guy is also seeking his own death. He actually dared to deceive me. He is really seeking his own death." "Deceive? I don't think he is deceiving me. As far as I know, that wood azure dragon should be a real thing." The purple-haired middle-aged man saw Yi Shiwen's indifferent look and couldn't help but be a little angry. However, he forcibly suppressed the unhappiness in his heart because he knew that Yi Shiwen was not someone to be trifled with. If it was only because of the death of an emperor lord, it was not enough to make him take action. However, that wood azure dragon forced him to take action. He treated the living wood azure dragon as a dead one and sold it to me. It's just that he was blind. I won't go so far as to kill him. However, he actually wants to take it back. That's seeking his own death. He can't blame others. Why? Are you also interested in the wood azure dragon? Yi Shiwen looked at the purple-haired middle-aged man in front of him indifferently, with an unconcealable indifference in his expression. Chapter 35:17. Yi Shiwen had a faint smile on his face. He was obviously teasing him. However, the purple-haired middle-aged man was obviously more shrewd than everyone thought. His expression did not change, and he only said, "Of course. You bought the wood azure dragon at the price of an Emperor Daoist weapon. Isn't it a big bargain? What's more, you killed him and took the wood azure dragon. This is against the rules." He just pretended not to hear the slightly mocking tone in Yi Shiwen's words. At this time, many onlookers finally understood why such a situation happened. It turned out that it involved the azure dragon. There were many people present who knew and were familiar with the azure dragon. Naturally, they knew what it was. Before Yi Shiwen came down, they already knew that the purple-haired middle-aged man wanted to target Yi Shiwen. He did not hide it, but they did not know why the purple-haired middle-aged man wanted to target Yi Shiwen. Many people looked at Yi Shiwen with a greedy look in their eyes. Although they knew that Yi Shiwen was not someone to be trifled with, that was the wood azure dragon. It was not an ordinary thing. Even if the wood azure dragon did not ascend to become a dragon, it was not difficult for ordinary emperors to cross another realm after swallowing it. In particular, there were a few green wood era heavenly masters and emperors present. Their eyes were full of greed, and their reasons were more sufficient. After all, the Ewood Azure Dragon was a treasure bred by their era. They had the right to get it back. As for who it belonged to after getting it back, was there a need to say? Broke the rules? Ha ha, what rules? It's so funny, Yi Shiwen said with a laugh. Then, what do you think we should do? Since you have already bought it, I don't want to pursue it. How about splitting it in half? I only want half. I won't pursue the rest. The purple-haired middle-aged man saw that Yi Shiwen seemed to have room for negotiation, so he could not help but speak. Ha 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 ha, that's ridiculous. Yi Shiwen opened his eyes slightly and said coldly, Who do you think you are? You want to pursue it? Since you are blind, you should be willing to admit your defeat. Who are you trying to show that you are acting shamelessly at this time? You? The purple-haired middle-aged man probably didn't expect that Yi Shiwen would be so impolite. Yi Shiwen had already turned hostile, and there was no possibility of reconciliation at all. You what? You want the Wood Azure Dragon? Then you have to exchange your life for it. Yi Shiwen shouted. What a great outsider. What kind of place do you think the 7 Absolute City is? This isn't a place where you can behave atrociously. The purple-haired middle-aged man was instantly enraged. His figure directly flew above the 7 Absolute City, entered the chaos, and shouted, Outsider, do you dare to fight me? What's so great about fighting you? Yi Shiwen sneered and directly flew up to confront him in the chaos. He didn't fall into a disadvantageous position. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. The purple-haired middle-aged man said coldly. Originally, he didn't want to offend Yi Shiwen. Although he was a native of the 7 Absolute City, he knew that every expert who could cross the chaos to come here was the most powerful existence in each era, and any one of them was not to be trifled with. Especially the Celestial Master, who was the worst of the worst. If it wasn't for his greed for the Wood Azure Dragon that covered everything, he probably wouldn't have made a move at will. But looking at Yi Shiwen again, it was clear that he would not make any concessions. Since he couldn't reason with him, he could only fight. As he spoke, the purple-haired middle-aged man launched an attack directly towards Yi Shiwen. Every step he took caused a large area of chaos to collapse directly. The chaos that hid in the chaos suffered unimaginable damage. What quasi-emperor? What emperor? They were too weak in front of the real Celestial Master. He didn't hold back at all because he didn't know Yi Shiwen's specific cultivation, so he didn't dare to make a move at will. All the blood in his body was boiling. His long purple hair fluttered in the wind, like a raging flame that soared into the sky. He was glowing from head to toe, as though he had come from countless times before the apocalypse to the present, a terrifying character that had crossed the entire river of time. This was a kind of invincible might. The energy ripples of a single person suppressed the entire primal chaos, shaking the entire 7 Absolute City. Even the formations and barriers in the 7 Absolute City were automatically awakened. Because they sensed the overly terrifying might, the ancient formations and barriers that were in deep slumber were awakened. It was completely different from the formations of today's martial arts civilization. It was as if the formations and boundaries came from the end of time and the depths of the origin. Many experts who were watching in the 7 Absolute City felt a chill down their spine when they saw this scene. This purple-haired middle-aged man was too strong. The 5th realm, he actually entered the 5th realm. All these years, he has been in seclusion. Now, after not seeing him for a long time, he is actually so strong, a veteran Celestial Master said, seemingly a little surprised. They also recognized this purple-haired middle-aged man long ago, but they didn't know he was so strong. No matter how strong this outsider is, it's impossible for him to be a match for him. The gap between the two of them is truly too great. Moreover, he cultivates in the extremely tyrannical laws of fire. He's simply at the peak of perfection in this Tao, and no one can compare to him. In the face of this purple-haired, middle-aged man's invincibility, Yi Shiwen didn't have the slightest fear at all. He just took a step forward, and suddenly his body bloomed with endless golden light, turning into a side of the world, directly isolating the purple-haired middle-aged man's aura. At this time, the purple-haired middle-aged man pinched a seal, and countless flames soared from his body. It was a strange purple color. Yishuan had never seen such a strange purple flame before. These flames had just appeared, and the countless primal chaos arrays immediately soared up. Then, they transformed into a huge portal and pressed down on Yishuan with unimaginable and terrifying power. Strong. This was an extremely strong person, extremely strong. And Yishuan didn't have the slightest fear. He just blasted out a punch, and the golden fist energy brought about a terrifying storm. Yishuan didn't want to expose his identity. As a celestial master of the martial arts epic, he was afraid that he would be coveted here. However, with his current strength, he could even fight against ordinary 6th realm celestial masters. He only needed to use his physical cultivation to resist, so he wasn't afraid of 5th realm experts. With just one punch, the entire world turned upside down and shattered chaos was everywhere. This punch directly blasted on the huge flame door. Bang! A terrifying collision formed a stalemate, but this stalemate only lasted for a second. It was as if it had been frozen, and it was destroyed in an instant. This door seemed to be unimaginably strong, but in fact, it still couldn't withstand a single blow. It completely collapsed in front of Yishuan. This was a type of flame law that Yishuan had never come into contact with before. There were countless types of flame laws on this path. Although they seemed similar, in fact, they weren't the same thing. Yishuan broke the flame door with one blow, and the momentum of his fist didn't decrease. It directly blasted in front of the purple-haired middle-aged man. The purple-haired middle-aged man suddenly felt a little anxious. Yishuan was too strong. He had broken his own law with just his strong physical body. He was really the most terrifying physique cultivator he had seen so far. Yes, he had already identified Yishuan as a physique cultivator. This kind of person was extremely difficult to find. Even in the universe, there were very few of them. In front of him, countless creatures formed by flames suddenly manifested and instantly blasted towards Yishuan. However, in front of Yishuan's punch, it still wasn't enough. A simple punch directly broke through it, and then directly blasted towards the purple-haired middle-aged man. He wasn't prepared at all. Although the physical body of a celestial master was very strong, it also depended on what kind of damage he was facing. The gung metal ancestral chi contained in Yishuan's fist was too sharp. The terrifying power that could break through everything instantly made his chest a bloody mess. Bone fragments flew, and blood flowed. Puff! The purple-haired middle-aged man spat out a mouthful of blood essence, and then instantly flew backward. How can he be so strong? It's just a punch. Many celestial masters and emperor lords in the 7 absolute city couldn't help but gasp when they saw this scene. The strength that Yishuan displayed was too strong. The strength that the purple-haired middle-aged man displayed before was already very strong, but in front of Yishuan, he was still no match for Yishuan. It was just a simple punch, and he was sent flying. Many experts who originally coveted the wood azure dragon in Yishuan's hands had completely dispelled this unrealistic idea at this time. Compared to this monster, it was really not worth it. Even the real top celestial masters didn't dare to say that they could beat the current Yishuan. Everyone just regarded him as an ordinary physique cultivator. Physique cultivators were already very strong, especially a powerhouse like him who could send a 5th realm celestial master flying with a punch. Perhaps even a 6th realm celestial master might not be able to take him down. However, they didn't know that this was Yishuan hiding his strength. Otherwise, he would only be stronger because the strength of physique cultivators had a limit, and they could only reach that point. However, Yishuan wasn't a physique cultivator. His laws and magical powers were stronger. The purple-haired middle-aged man only felt that his body was about to fall apart. The gung metal ancestral chi swept into his body, and it was difficult to expel. Without waiting for him to do anything, Yishuan pressed forward again, and it was another fatal blow. Chapter 35:18. The purple-haired middle-aged man was sent flying by the punch. He felt as if all the bones in his body were about to be broken. He hadn't expected that Yishiwen's fists would be so powerful. In terms of physique cultivation alone, it was already terrifyingly tyrannical. For a true physique cultivator, there was the concept of breaking all laws with one punch. In the world, no heavenly treasures or divine weapons were more reliable than one's own pair of fists. He had already realized that he was not Yi Shiwen's opponent in the first exchange. He already regretted making a move for the Wood Azure Dragon, or rather, regretted making a move so rashly. Originally, he did not want the Wood Azure Dragon to be obtained by other celestial masters, so he did not want others to intervene. However, now it seemed that he had miscalculated. He should have found others to help him so that he would have a chance of winning. But it was meaningless to think about this at this time because Yi Shiwen's next wave of attack had already arrived. Yi Shiwen flew high and trampled down with his foot. It grew bigger and bigger, like a primordial divine mountain, trampling down fiercely. Boom! The purple-haired middle-aged man did not have time to resist at all. He was directly trampled, and his body was torn into pieces. Bone fragments flew everywhere, and blood splattered. A dignified celestial master was trampled into pieces in front of everyone. So strong. In the 7 Absolute City, many emperor lords and celestial masters were stunned. Yi Shiwen clearly looked like he was only in the 5th realm, but the strength he displayed was enough to beat the purple-haired middle-aged man who was also in the 5th realm. Although they were both in the 5th realm, the combat power between them was too far apart. "Roar, outsider, you are too much." The purple-haired middle-aged man roared, and the aura on his body spread, suddenly becoming many times more terrifying. He was forced to the extreme, and he was beaten in front of everyone. How could his pride accept it? The purple-haired middle-aged man's source was burning, and the terrifying aura that spread out made the world collapse. It was not a universe, not a universe. The aura of chaos began to boil crazily, and the terrifying aura flowed, and the laws were destroyed. His all-out attack turned into a fiery beast that soared out of his body. It was huge and ferocious. It coiled around the entire universe and rushed towards Yi Shiwen. This flaming beast actually had the strength of an Empyrean or higher. Its massive body seemed to fill up the entire primal chaos. The endless flames emitted from its body boiled the entire primal chaos. The expressions of the heavenly venerables in the 7 Absolute City changed. It would be very difficult for them to withstand an attack of this level. Even the weaker sovereign emperors could feel a terrifying feeling of destruction through the barrier and array of the 7 Absolute City. These imperial emperors were also powerful extreme cultivators, but they were still nothing in the face of this massive force. The battle was going to decide the outcome. This thought appeared in everyone's mind. Given Yi Shiwen's strength, it was indeed enough to beat this purple-haired middle-aged man. Because of this, they could not delay any longer. They could only decide the outcome in one battle. In the face of this flaming beast that almost occupied the entire universe, Yi Shiwen's expression did not change at all. His body emitted endless golden light, and he stood on an azure dragon, surrounded by a deity emperor. He was tall and mighty, and he looked like a world that had calmed down the primal chaos. This purple-haired middle-aged man burned his source to erupt with strength, and he was more than 10 times stronger than before. However, Yi Shiwen's aura also exploded, and it also increased by many times. He can still improve? He can still improve? Many heavenly venerables were stunned when they saw this scene. It was simply an impossible miracle. Yi Shiwen could still improve his strength, and unlike the purple-haired middle-aged man, he did not burn his source. Just his own strength had already reached such a terrifying level. It was almost impossible to find an opponent in the 5th realm. Can someone really be this strong in the 5th realm? Many people felt that it was incredible. Strong, strong, strong. Everyone also felt Yi Shiwen's tyrannical and unimaginably terrifying aura. Then, they saw him blasting out a punch. It was a kind of extreme killer move. It couldn't be said to be a martial art or a magical power. It was just a punch that relied on the strength of his own body. The entire space-time was annihilated. This punch directly blasted into the body of this flaming beast, and the terrifying fist force exploded in this flaming beast body. Long. Everyone seemed to have seen a series of explosions. The originally powerful and insufferably arrogant flaming beast actually exploded on the spot under such a punch. His incomparably powerful flaming beast suddenly exploded, and then his whole body exploded like a ball of fireworks. In this fierce and terrifying collision, Yi Shiwen's fist force did not lose momentum and directly blasted into the body of the purple-haired middle-aged man. His body had just been blown up by Yi Shiwen, and now he had just recovered, and he was blasted again. In this strong collision, he lost to Yi Shiwen, and then only saw him flying out horizontally. His figure was like a meteor, and no one knew how many miles he flew before he finally stopped. The bones in his chest had been completely broken, and blood blossomed between heaven and earth. His glabella was also scratched by the fist force, and his skull was broken. Even everyone could see that his spirit, without the protection of his body, began to burn and was ignited by the fist force. He is going to die. Everyone was stunned. Yi Shiwen was too strong. He was like a true god in the world, and the wind and clouds changed as he raised his hand. The wind and clouds surged in the chaos. Yi Shiwen raised his arm high, and it turned into a sword. It seemed to be the Avicii sword, the Tai's sovereign sword, and the collection of all the sword Dao tools that Yi Shiwen had come into contact with before. It turned into a divine sword, and it chopped down. Puff! This divine sword was like a big dragon, cutting open the chaos, and a burst of blood mist erupted. The purple-haired middle-aged man was cut by the sword on the spot, and he was killed on the spot. His spirit was burning fiercely. Just this sword had the power to kill a celestial master, and destroying a world was even easier. The chaos burst, and the divine light flickered. In the chaos, only the scream of the purple-haired middle-aged man could be heard, and he died. The light of the sword exploded in the entire world, and there was no more dazzling existence in the entire chaos. 3 moves from the beginning to the end. It was only 3 moves. Many people gasped. Yi Shiwen only spent 3 moves from the beginning to the end, and he killed a celestial master of the 5th realm. Moreover, everyone could see that this was not Yi Shiwen's limit. It was just a small test of his strength. Because he hadn't burned his origin and hadn't mobilized all his strength, even so, it had already made the celestial masters feel a sense of invincibility, and the emperors even felt a doomsday-like dangerous aura entrenched. It was precisely because Yi Shiwen's speed of killing the purple-haired middle-aged man was too fast that some native masters of the 7 Absolute City, who originally intended to stop Yi Shiwen, stopped. The relationship between them wasn't necessarily very good. However, they were still relatively united when it came to dealing with outsiders. Yi Shiwen had killed the experts of their city. This was also a slap to their faces. So how could they not act? But before they could decide whether to attack, Yi Shiwen had already decided to fight. That kind of decisive battle, that kind of terrifying strength had already shocked them, and they could only give up the idea of attacking. Who asked the purple-haired middle-aged man to be so useless? He couldn't even resist a few moves from Yi Shiwen. However, they also understood that the real reason was not that the purple-haired middle-aged man was too useless, but that Yi Shiwen was too strong. Many of these real powerhouses had experienced the great destruction of the world, but they had never seen such a terrifying celestial master of the 5th realm. Even if he's a physique cultivator, he's too ridiculously strong. This was what they were thinking, and it was precisely Yi Shiwen's decisive attack that stopped them from attacking. After killing the purple-haired middle-aged man, Yi Shiwen directly grabbed all his blood essence and then watered it into the world tree, urging the entire world tree fruit to ripen. As long as the world tree fruit ripened, his strength could be steadily promoted to a higher level. The greenwood azure dragon was good. However, it was a divine creature that was rarely seen in millions of years. So, It was impossible to see it in ordinary times. Therefore, it was extremely precious. The world tree fruit was slightly inferior. However, it could be continuously cultivated by himself. Therefore, it was naturally very important for Yi Shiwen at present. Yi Shiwen's gaze shot directly into the seven absolute city like two sharp swords. Just now in the seven absolute city, Yi Shiwen had sensed that someone had planned to attack. Someone had locked their spirit on him. So he had sped up his attack because he knew that he couldn't give those people a chance to attack. Otherwise, although he was confident that he could protect himself, he would also cause unnecessary trouble and go against the entire seven absolute city. Now, as the purple-haired middle-aged man was killed, those people naturally gave up and no longer had the intention to intervene. A dead person was like a lamp going out, and when the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. No one was willing to offend a powerful celestial master for a dead person. This was human nature. There was still a competitive relationship between them, and it was not good to this extent. However, the moment those people's spirit senses locked onto Yi Shiwen, they were also locked by him. Now, he was just giving them a slight warning to not attack. However, since his injuries had recovered, Yi Shiwen planned to leave this place as soon as possible and return to the era battlefield, lest a long night brings trouble. And at this moment, a voice came from the seven absolute city. "Friend, you're really skilled. Please come down and meet us." Chapter 35:19. You're really skilled. Please come down and meet me. Just as Yi Shiwen was about to leave, a voice came into his ears. Yi Shiwen looked down in the direction of the voice and saw a figure standing on a mountain peak in the seven absolute city, greeting him. It was a handsome young man in a black robe. He looked like a human, but the faint demonic aura around him did not conceal his identity at all. The demon lord of the devil era. Yi Shiwen frowned slightly because he didn't know this person and didn't know what his purpose was. However, he also knew that the other party didn't come for him. After all, he had the supreme ancestral symbol on his body to conceal all his aura. In addition, he was very careful, so no one knew his specific origin. Don't be suspicious, I mean no harm. The demon lord grinned as if he knew Yi Shiwen's doubts. He seemed very kind. I'd like to see what he's planning. Since Yi Shiwen was sure that this demon lord wasn't coming for him, he immediately retracted his magical power, descended, and went straight to the side of this demon lord. Yi Shiwen stepped forward and said, "I don't know why you stopped me, Taoism friend. Let me introduce myself first. I am Luo Ho. I believe I cannot hide my identity from you. I am the demon sovereign of the demon Dao epoch. May I know your title?" The demon sovereign of the demon Dao epoch Luo Ho said politely, "I'm the righteous heavenly lord." Yi Shiwen casually fabricated an identity for himself, but he was wary of Luo Ho. When they were talking just now, the two of them had already probed each other. Luo Ho already had an understanding of Yi Shiwen's realm. It was roughly the cultivation realm of the fifth realm. However, Yi Shiwen was ridiculously strong in the fifth realm. He was much stronger than many experts at the peak of the fifth realm. Yi Shiwen didn't hide his cultivation because his real trump card wasn't his realm, but his real combat power. He could even fight against the powerhouses of the sixth realm. This was his real trump card. The perception that Luo Ho gave Yi Shiwen was unfathomable. With Yi Shiwen's cultivation, he could see through it at a glance if it was the sixth realm. However, it wasn't as difficult to resist as a middle heavenly venerable. It was a bit similar to the feeling he had when he had first met Mr. Huang. Yi Shiwen estimated that Luo Ho might be at the seventh realm, or even the eighth realm. How could he not be wary? Although there were many experts in the demonic path epoch, high-level Empyreans above the seventh realm were still very rare. Not to mention the super-existences of the ninth realm. Even the seventh realm and eighth realm held high positions and authority. Now that such a high-level devil had appeared, Yi Shiwen naturally became vigilant. However, he had the supreme ancestral symbol in his hand. So, he had the confidence to see what this high-level devil wanted to do. The martial path epoch and the demonic path epoch were mortal enemies. The martial path epoch wanted to survive and develop. The demonic path epoch also wanted to survive and develop. So, they had to invade the martial path epoch and occupy it for their own use. There was no way to resolve the conflict between the two sides. No one wanted to die. Both wanted to survive the coming apocalypse. Righteous Heavenly Venerate. A strange look flashed in Luoho's eyes. He seemed to have thought of something from this name. So, it's the Righteous Heavenly Venerate. Luoho cupped his hands and said, "Then I'll get straight to the point." I called out to fellow Taoist for no other reason than to hope that fellow Taoist can lend me a hand. "Please speak." "I'll listen first," Yi Shiwen said non-committally. "Since you asked, I'll say it directly." Luoho smiled faintly and said, "Destroy the epoch." Yi Shiwen's heart skipped a beat when he heard these words. However, he quickly calmed down and asked, "Destroy the epoch? Which epoch do you plan to destroy?" What a big move. However, I'm afraid we can't destroy an epoch with our strength. Yi Shiwen said. No matter how confident he was, he knew what it meant to destroy an epoch. Not to mention whether they could find it or not. Even if they could, the power of the epoch's heavenly law could kill them in minutes. Last time, the Middle Heavenly Venerate and Yi Shiwen were able to destroy the 7th Gold Epoch because the 7th Gold Epoch did not expect their lair to be found. Many experts followed the demonic path epoch to fight in Moon City. In addition, the heavenly law was sealed by the Heaven's Sealing Talisman, so there was no way to exert the power of the heavenly law. In the end, the Middle Heavenly Venerate and the others succeeded because they had their own special reasons that could not be replicated. Normally, if one wanted to destroy an epoch, they had to use the power of an epoch to succeed. Although this Luoho looked strong, he was at most as strong as Mr. Huang. He was far weaker than the Middle Heavenly Venerate. How could he go against the heavens and destroy an epoch? Don't panic, Taoism friend. How can we not consider what Taoism friend has considered? This time, the era that is about to be destroyed is none other than a fallen era's heavenly Tao. This era was already destroyed in the last great apocalypse, and there are no longer any living beings on it. Only a bit of the heavenly Tao lingers on, and it's already nothing to worry about, Luoho said. Yi Shiwen felt as if he had suddenly realized something after listening to Luoho's explanation. So that's how it is. No wonder Luoho is so daring. Yi Shiwen would have immediately turned hostile and left if it was a stupid and bold plan. Taoism friend should have found someone else. We can't do this with just the two of us, even if we have to destroy a fallen epoch's heavenly law, said Yi Shiwen. He suddenly calculated in his heart. Luoho's words made him understand what they were going to do. It was obvious that they wanted to do what he and the Middle Heavenly Venerate did in the past. It was just that the Middle Heavenly Venerate destroyed a complete epoch's heavenly law. Although the 7th Gold Epoch was weak, it did not fall. The difficulty was naturally incomparable. Of course, the benefits that could be obtained after the sacrifice to the heavens could not be compared. But if all of them were concentrated on one person, it would be very impressive. If he obtained this credit, then it would be almost a matter of time to enter the 6th realm. It was not difficult at all. Of course, even a fallen epoch's heavenly law was not a problem that he and Luoho could solve. The power of heavenly law was heavenly law after all. Within the scope of heavenly law, it was difficult for anyone to match the power of heavenly law. Although he did not know how Luoho found it, obviously there should not be much residual energy left. It was worth a try. However, how to do it needed to be planned slowly. If Luoho obtained the power of this sacrifice, then the consequences would be unimaginable. The demonic era would have another supermaster. Moreover, Luoho could mobilize the power of the demonic era by himself, but he looked for Yi Shiwen and possibly other heavenly venerates. Yi Shiwen was afraid that he did not have good intentions. Yi Shiwen had to be careful lest he fell into his evil trap. Of course, given our strength, it's still a bit too much. I've also found 3 other fellow Taoists. There's a total of 5 of us. That should be enough to sacrifice the fallen heavenly Tao and completely destroy that fallen era. Luoho said confidently. I can help you with this, but I will not help for free, said Yishiwen. Although he had already decided not to let Luoho succeed, he still wanted to extract as much benefits from him as possible. Of course, I did not think that I would let you come for nothing. This king-level dragon vein is the reward for your help. How about it? Luoho flipped his palm, and suddenly a small black dragon swam freely on his palm. It was a king-level dragon vein, but the energy contained in this dragon vein was different. It was a dragon vein that was born under different laws. It should be a dragon vein that existed in the demonic era. For ordinary Emperor Lords, this was indeed unsolvable because they couldn't use the Demon Path era's dragon vein. However, for Empyreans, they were existences that could change the laws. They could change the laws of this Demon Path era's king-level dragon vein and make it spit out spiritual chi. And these dragon veins were born from the essence of heaven and earth. It was impossible to determine which era had first produced dragon veins, but after that, even more perfect eras had produced dragon veins. Slowly, dragon veins became a form of wealth that Empyreans could use to trade with each other. Yishiwen's eyes lit up. Needless to say, the preciousness of a king-level dragon vein was needless to say. Many celestial masters did not even have a single king-level dragon vein. Even Yishiwen only had an incomplete king-level dragon vein, and he had completely consumed it. This was the second king-level dragon vein that he had seen. These king-level dragon veins were all treasures among treasures. They could be used for cultivation, could suppress luck, and could even evolve into powerful spirits to fight everywhere. There were even many First Realm and Second Realm heavenly venerates who could only use level 1 dragon veins as wealth. King-level dragon veins were too difficult to find. Whether it was in the martial era or the demonic era, there was no difference. Yishiwen took the ink-colored dragon vein and swam it on his palm. He could feel the surging energy contained in it, which could almost overturn a world. He couldn't help but say, "You're really generous." Suddenly, Yishiwen sensed that there was actually a blood-colored thread in the depths of this ink-colored dragon vein, and it was faintly discernible. If it wasn't for Yishiwen's acute senses, he might really have missed it. Chapter 35:20. This guy really doesn't have any good intentions. Yishiwen immediately understood Luoho's little trick. He looked carefully and saw that the blood-red thread in the depths of the ink-black dragon vein was actually a talisman. It had turned into a thread and was completely integrated into the depths of the dragon vein. If Yishiwen was not careful when absorbing the ink-black dragon vein, this talisman would completely enter his body and leave behind a huge hidden danger. It was just that Yishiwen still did not know what this talisman was used for, but in general, it was not a good thing. Because it was buried very deep, it could not be discovered at all. Even this ink-black, king-level dragon vein was integrated into one. If not for the slight vibration of the supreme ancestral symbol, which alerted him, he would have been deceived. Yishiwen felt cold in his heart, but on the surface, there was not the slightest change. Since he had already discovered the existence of this charm, then the rest of the matter was much easier to handle. It was impossible for the charm to enter his body again. All he had to do was peel it off. With this ink-colored king-level dragon vein in hand, he could speed up the absorption of the remaining Ewood Azure Dragon. It was only a matter of time before his cultivation level rose to the peak of level 5. When he reached the peak of the 5th realm, his actual combat power would be enough to sweep across the 6th realm. He would be invincible and fearless. You're too kind, fellow Taoist. I'll be able to obtain a great deal of benefits by destroying this era that's about to fall. It's just a win-win situation. Luoho roared with laughter. His laughter was extremely hearty, and not a trace of malice could be discerned from it. If not for the fact that he saw the talisman in the ink-black king-level dragon vein, Yishiwen might really have been deceived by him. What win-win situation? Destroying an era's heavenly way and sacrificing it to the heavenly way of the demonic era? He would also obtain great benefits. Compared to this, a king-level dragon vein was nothing. However, he was not even willing to give up this little benefit. Yi Shiwen was vigilant, but he still pretended that he did not see it on the surface. He kept the king-level dragon vein. Luo Ho smiled slightly when he saw Yi Shiwen accept it. He thought that his backup plan hadn't startled Yi Shiwen. He was even prepared to fall out with Yi Shiwen. How could it be so easy to deceive a powerful celestial master? However, to him, it was naturally for the best if he deceived Yi Shiwen. If not, then he could only act first. "Friend Luo Ho, are we leaving now? Or do we have to wait for a while?" Yi Shiwen asked. "I'll have to wait for a moment, fellow Taoist. There's another fellow Taoist I have to invite." Luo Ho said, "Please come with me, fellow Taoist. There are already 2 fellow Taoists waiting." Luo Ho led Yi Shiwen to the bottom of this mountain peak. There was a barrier. 2 figures had been waiting inside the barrier for a long time. One of them was tall. It seemed as if he was soaring into the sky. His entire body was jet black. It seemed as if countless streams of water were revolving around his body. In fact, it seemed as if they would surge into a vast ocean at any time. He led Yi Shiwen to the bottom of the mountain. There was a boundary. Inside the boundary, there were already 2 figures waiting. One of them was tall, as if he was soaring into the sky. His whole body was black. His body seemed to be surrounded by countless streams of water. The other was a woman who looked to be in her 30s. She wore a gorgeous robe, had fair skin, and a beautiful face. However, there seemed to be a picture of the universe flickering in her eyes. The other one was a woman who looked like she was about 30 years old. She was wearing a gorgeous robe. Her skin was fair, and her face was beautiful. However, there seemed to be a picture of the universe and galaxy flashing in her eyes. Seeing that Luo Ho had let another person in, the 2 looked over. They seemed to recognize Yi Shiwen. Both of their faces showed a bit of surprise. That scene left a deep impression on them. In terms of strength, the purple-haired middle-aged man was not inferior to them. However, in front of Yi Shiwen, he was not a match at all. The 2 speculated that in the 5th realm, Yi Shiwen would not be a match at all. In this situation, the 2 inevitably had some thoughts in their hearts. However, neither of them showed it. After all, they had seen Yi Shiwen's amazing performance just now. If they were in his shoes, their performance would not be much better. They would also be defeated in a few moves. An expert at the peak of the 5th realm. When he saw the 2, Yi Shiwen had already estimated their strength. Either one of them was not inferior to the purple-haired middle-aged man whom he had defeated earlier. Luo Ho had found so many experts. However, in terms of realm, none of them could compare to Luo Ho. If Yi Shiwen did not think so much at first, and only thought that it might be because it was difficult to find experts above the 7th realm, then he had another thought now. This was probably because the experts that Luo Ho was looking for could not be stronger than him. Otherwise, it would be difficult to control. Although he did not know what Luo Ho was planning, he could roughly guess. In any case, he could not find experts that were too strong. Otherwise, it would be a hindrance to his plan. Let me introduce everyone. This is the righteous heavenly Lord. Luo Ho introduced, fellow Taoist righteous heavenly Lord. This is supremacy heavy water and immortal fairy Ling Yun. Both of them are top-notch experts. I paid a hefty price to invite them. Greetings to the 2 of you. Yi Shiwen bowed slightly. The 2 of them returned the greeting. Righteous Heavenly Lord. Greetings to the righteous Heavenly Lord. Facing a top expert who was at the same level as them, or even more powerful than them, they did not dare and had no reason to be arrogant. The 3 of you can wait here for a while. It's good to chat. I'll go find the last one, Luo Ho said. The 3 of them nodded. Luo Ho turned and left. Then, the 3 of them closed their eyes to rest. Yi Shiwen simply closed his eyes and sat cross-legged. A cloud bed appeared below him and gently supported him. Yi Shiwen probed the ink-colored king-level dragon vein with his divine senses. Compared to the incomplete king-level dragon vein that Yi Shiwen had obtained back then, this king-level dragon vein was not just a little stronger. It could not be mentioned in the same breath at all. The incomplete king-level dragon vein that Yi Shiwen had obtained back, then had obviously gone through a great battle before it became like that. Compared to a real king-level dragon vein, it could not even compare to 1/3, let alone the others. The surging energy contained in this ink-colored king-level dragon vein was several times more than the one that Yi Shiwen had obtained back then. It would have been even better if it did not contain that talisman. Yi Shiwen probed it with his divine senses. The talisman was hidden very deeply. It was even difficult to capture it. If it was not for the help of the supreme ancestral symbol, he would not have discovered it at all. And now, after spending a long time, he finally discovered this talisman wandering around this ink-colored dragon vein. Seal. In Yi Shiwen's inner world, an additional seal word appeared. In an instant, the talisman in this ink-colored dragon vein was completely sealed. This talisman was not difficult to seal. The difficult part was discovering it. If it was absorbed into his body, it would be too late to discover it. However, Yi Shiwen did not choose to extinguish it directly. He did not know what this talisman had to do with Rahu. It would be great if it alarmed him. However, after sealing the talisman, it would no longer affect his ability to absorb the energy within the inky dragon vein. Although it was demonic energy from the demonic era, and ordinary people would not be able to withstand it, it did not matter to Yi Futian. At his level of cultivation, all energy could return to its original state and become the purest form of energy. Otherwise, how could he cross the chaos? He would have been swallowed by the chaos aura a long time ago. An ink-colored dragon vein was constantly swimming in Yi Shiwen's inner world like a real dragon. Its body emitted circles of demonic aura. After leaving his body, half of it was transformed into the purest spiritual aura and poured into the world tree. The world tree fruit hanging on the world tree was getting closer and closer to ripening. During this period of time, Yi Shiwen had continuously watered it with the blood essence of several heavenly masters and even the city lord of the Moon City. Coupled with the addition of the Ink Black King level dragon vein, its growth speed would only accelerate faster and faster. The other half of the demonic aura directly poured into his limbs and bones. Much of it was also absorbed by the mysterious space. This allowed Yi Shiwen to absorb the E-Wood Azure Dragon faster and faster. His cultivation also gradually improved. It was no longer like when he had just entered the 5th realm. In a short period of time, he had completely consolidated the cultivation of the 5th realm and even became more profound. This speed was simply incredible. The increase in power every second was even comparable to the progress of Yi Shiwen's ordinary cultivation for an entire year. At this speed, it was only a matter of time before he truly entered the peak of the 5th realm. This was the speed shown by completely absorbing the E-Wood Azure Dragon. However, no matter how much Yi Shiwen's power improved, it was all locked in his body. There was no leakage at all. Suddenly, at this moment, an incomparably powerful aura suddenly descended into this barrier. Yi Shiwen suddenly opened his eyes and saw a young man in a starry and moon-shaped robe descending on a sky full of escape lights. He was like a dragon crouching and a tiger coiling, with a momentum that could devour mountains and rivers. This young man looked about 20 years old. He looked cold. After looking around at the 3 people, he became indifferent. There was not a trace of emotion on his face. Extremely arrogant, Yi Shiwen instantly made a judgment. Immediately after him, Raha's figure also appeared in front of everyone. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.